Hey story enthusiasts! This is Potter Vibes bringing you another gem. In this video, we present to you Molly and Arthur Weasley arrived at Privet Drive with a healer and the head of Magical Child Services. Dumbledore found out 6 hours too late. If you enjoy these stories as much as we enjoy sharing them, please like, subscribe, and share with your friends. Let's dive in. Chapter 1. The letters of number 4. The kitchen of the burrow hummed with its usual morning chaos. Sunlight streamed through the windows, catching dust motes that danced above the worn wooden table where most of the Weasley children sat devouring their breakfast. Molly bustled between the stove and table, her wand occasionally flicking toward a pot that stirred itself or a knife that continued slicing bread without her direct attention. "Ron, you've been staring at that letter for 10 minutes, George said, reaching across the table for another piece of toast. "Either read it properly or put it away." Ron didn't look up, his brow furrowed as he read through Harry's latest letter for the third time. Something felt off about the carefully written words. The handwriting was neat, too neat, as though Harry had taken great pains with each letter. "Is it from Harry again?" Fred asked, mouth half full. "What's he saying about those Muggle relatives of his?" "Not much," Ron muttered, flipping the parchment over as though searching for hidden text. "That's the problem." Arthur lowered his copy of the Daily Prophet, peering at his youngest son over the top of his glasses. "Problem, Ron?" Ron hesitated, then passed the letter across the table to his father. "Harry says everything's fine, but—" Arthur took the letter, adjusting his glasses as he began to read. "Dear Ron, thank you for your invitation. I'm doing well here at my aunt and uncle's house. They are treating me fine. I have plenty to eat and my bedroom is adequate for my needs. I appreciate your concern, but there's no need to worry about me. I'm getting my summer homework done and keeping busy. I'm sorry, but I won't be able to visit this summer. My aunt and uncle feel it would disrupt their plans. Perhaps we can meet in Diagon Alley before term starts. Please give my regards to your family. Your friend, Harry Potter." Arthur's expression grew more troubled as he read. When he finished, he passed the letter to Molly, who had appeared at his shoulder with a fresh pot of tea. "This doesn't sound like Harry at all," she said after scanning it quickly. "It's so formal." "That's what I thought," Ron agreed, stabbing at his eggs with unusual force. "And it's the third one like it. They're all exactly the same. He's fine, everything's adequate, and he can't visit." Ginny, who had been quiet until now, looked up from her plate. "Maybe he just doesn't want to come." Her cheeks flushed slightly at the mention of Harry, but her concern was evident beneath her embarrassment. "No way," Ron insisted. "He was desperate to get away from those Muggles last summer. Kept talking about how horrible they were." Fred and George exchanged a look that their parents didn't miss. "Boys?" Arthur prompted. "Something to add?" The twins shifted uncomfortably. "Well," Fred began, "we might have some additional information." "Purely coincidental reconnaissance," George added quickly. "Absolutely unavoidable intelligence gathering. Completely unplanned surveillance." Molly planted her hands on her hips. "What did you two do?" Fred cleared his throat. "Remember last summer when we took Dad's car to rescue Harry?" Arthur's expression darkened. "How could I forget? Your mother nearly hexed me into next week." "And rightfully so," Molly muttered. "Well, what we saw there," George continued, suddenly serious. "Those bars on his window weren't the only problem. They were starving him," Fred said flatly. "Feeding him through a cat flap in the door. And all his school things were locked up in a cupboard under the stairs," George added. "We had to pick the lock to get them." "A cupboard under the—" Molly's voice trailed off, her face paling. "Arthur, you don't think—" Ron looked between his parents, confused. "What?" Arthur set the newspaper down completely, all pretense of casual morning reading abandoned. "Ron, did Harry ever mention where he slept before he came to Hogwarts?" Ron frowned, thinking. He said something once about a cupboard, but I thought he was joking. The kitchen fell silent. Percy, who had been quietly eating at the end of the table while reviewing a book on prefect duties, finally looked up. "If there's genuine concern about Potter's welfare," he said in his most officious tone, "there are proper channels to address it. The ministry has a Department of Magical Family Services that deals with such matters." For once, Arthur didn't dismiss Percy's bureaucratic approach. "You're right, Percy. And I believe Amelia Bones oversees that division now." "Arthur," Molly said quietly, placing a hand on her husband's shoulder. "These letters, they remind me of the ones my cousin Marlene used to write from home before she finally told us about her father." Arthur covered her hand with his own, his expression grim. "I know, Molly." Ron looked between his parents. "What does that mean?" "It means," Arthur said, standing abruptly, "that I'm going to be late for work today. Perkins will have to manage without me this morning." "What are you going to do?" Fred asked. "What we should have done last summer," Molly answered for him, already untying her apron. "We're going to check on Harry properly." 2 hours later, Arthur stepped out of the fireplace in Amelia Bones's office at the ministry, brushing soot from his worn robes. The head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement looked up from her desk with mild surprise. "Arthur Weasley," she said, setting down her quill. "This is unexpected." "Amelia," he nodded, his usual good-natured smile absent. "I apologize for the intrusion, but this couldn't wait for normal channels." Amelia gestured to the chair across from her desk. "Sit down." "What's this about?" Arthur remained standing. "I need to speak with whoever heads the Magical Child Welfare Division." "It's about Harry Potter." Amelia's monocle glinted as she straightened in her chair. "The boy who lived. What about him?" "I have reason to believe he's being mistreated by his Muggle relatives." "That's a serious allegation, Arthur," Amelia said, though her tone suggested she wasn't dismissing him. "Especially considering Albus Dumbledore personally arranged his placement there." "I'm aware," Arthur replied, his normal deference to authority notably absent. "But my children have provided compelling evidence, and the letters we've received from Harry." He pulled the latest letter from his pocket and handed it to her. Amelia read it carefully, her expression unreadable. When she finished, she removed her monocle and polished it thoughtfully with the edge of her robe. "I see," she said finally. "And you believe this letter indicates coercion?" "It's completely unlike him," Arthur confirmed. "And my sons rescued him last summer. They found him locked in his room with bars on the windows, being starved." Amelia's eyebrows shot up. "And this wasn't reported?" Arthur had the grace to look uncomfortable. "My boys used unauthorized means to retrieve him. I was focused on addressing that, and by the time things settled, Harry seemed fine. We assumed Dumbledore would." "I understand," Amelia sighed, replacing her monocle. "Dumbledore's judgment is rarely questioned, even when perhaps it should be." She stood decisively. "I oversee Magical Child Services directly. Let me contact Healer Abernathy from St. Mungo's Child Wellness Division. If we're going to do this, we'll do it properly." "Thank you, Amelia," Arthur said, relief evident in his voice. "Molly's waiting at home. We thought it best to approach through official channels before taking any action." "A wise decision," Amelia nodded, already writing a quick note. She tapped it with her wand, and the parchment folded itself into a paper airplane that zoomed out of the office. "Though I'm surprised you didn't go to Dumbledore first." Arthur's expression tightened. "Dumbledore placed him there and has left him there for 11 years. If what we suspect is true, well, I thought an impartial assessment would be better." "Indeed," Amelia murmured, something like respect flickering in her eyes. "Let's proceed with discretion for now. No need to alert the full ministry or the press. I'll meet you at your home in 1 hour with Healer Abernathy." Precisely 1 hour later, Amelia Bones stepped through the Weasleys' fireplace, followed moments later by a plump witch in lime green healer's robes. Molly had clearly been waiting, as she immediately stopped her nervous pacing and approached them. "Amelia, thank you for coming so quickly," she said, clasping the other woman's hand. "And you must be Healer Abernathy." "Eliza, please," the healer said with a warm smile that contrasted with her sharp, assessing eyes. "I understand there's concern about a child." "Harry Potter," Arthur confirmed, entering from the kitchen. "Our son Ron is his best friend at Hogwarts." Eliza's eyebrows rose slightly at the name, but her professional demeanor didn't waver. "I see. And what specifically has you concerned?" As the Weasleys explained the situation, bringing in Fred, George, and Ron to provide their observations, Eliza took careful notes on a small pad. Her expression grew increasingly grave. "Bars on windows," she murmured, underscoring the words. "Inadequate food. Possible confinement. And you say there was mention of a cupboard?" "We think it might have been where they kept him before Hogwarts," Molly said, her voice tight with barely controlled anger. "And these letters," Amelia added, reviewing the 3 notes Ron had provided. "They do read as though they were written under duress or dictation." "At minimum, they warrant investigation," Eliza agreed. "Especially given Mr. Potter's importance and vulnerability." "His importance has nothing to do with it," Molly said firmly. "He's a child. That's all that matters." Eliza smiled approvingly. "Precisely the right attitude, Mrs. Weasley." "So what now?" Arthur asked. "Now," Amelia said, standing, "we pay a visit to number 4, Privet Drive. I've taken the liberty of having the Flu network temporarily connected to a neighbor's house, a squib named Arabella Fig who apparently lives nearby." "Fig?" Molly frowned. "Isn't she one of Dumbledore's contacts?" "Yes," Amelia confirmed with a slight smile. "But she's also a registered squib with the Ministry, which gives me legitimate cause to use her fireplace without raising alarms." "You've thought of everything," Arthur said admiringly. "Not everything," Amelia corrected. "We still need a plan for when we arrive. These muggles could be difficult." "I'll handle the muggles," Molly said with a dangerous glint in her eye that made everyone in the room take a small step backward. "Perhaps," Eliza interjected diplomatically, "we should approach with caution. Mrs. Weasley and I could make initial contact, presenting as concerned school representatives. Mrs. Weasley is known to Harry, which should provide him comfort, and I can assess his condition. Madam Bones and Mr. Weasley can remain nearby as backup if needed." "And if they refuse to cooperate?" Arthur asked. "Then," Amelia said, patting her wand pocket, "we move to more official methods. I've brought the necessary paperwork to invoke emergency magical guardianship if required." "You think it might come to that?" Molly asked. "I hope not," Amelia replied. "But in my experience, people who mistreat children rarely welcome outside intervention." The clock on the wall chimed 3, its hands pointing to various locations where the Weasley family members could be found. Harry's absence from the clock face suddenly seemed like a glaring omission to Molly. "We should go," she said decisively. "It's a weekday afternoon, the Muggles should be home, and we don't want to wait until Harry's uncle returns from work if he's not already there." Arthur looked at his wife with pride and concern. "Are you sure you want to lead this, Molly? It could get unpleasant." Molly's expression softened as she touched her husband's cheek. "I've faced Death Eaters, Arthur. I think I can handle unpleasant Muggles." Her voice dropped so only he could hear. "Besides, after what they've done to that boy, I might enjoy it a little." Mrs. Fig's house smelled strongly of cabbage and cats. The elderly squib seemed unsurprised by their arrival, suggesting to Arthur that Dumbledore's network operated more efficiently than they'd hoped. "You're here about Harry, then?" she asked as they dusted themselves off in her cramped living room. "You know Harry?" Molly asked sharply. "I've watched him since he was small," Mrs. Fig confirmed. "Dumbledore asked me to keep an eye on him." Arthur and Amelia exchanged significant glances. "And what have you observed, Mrs. Fig?" Amelia asked formally. The old woman's face creased with discomfort. Nothing good, I'm afraid. Those Dursleys, they've never treated him right. Never hit him that I could see, but... She trailed off, absently stroking a grey cat that had leapt into her lap. But... Eliza prompted gently. They treated him like a servant. Hardly fed him. Made him wear his cousin's old clothes. Never a kind word. Her rheumy eyes suddenly focused sharply on Amelia. I told Dumbledore. Many times. Arthur's grip tightened on his wand. And what did Dumbledore say? Said the boy needed to stay with his blood relatives. Said it was the only way to keep him safe. She sniffed disapprovingly. Safe from what? I asked. Didn't seem very safe to me, wasting away in that house. Molly made a small, distressed sound in the back of her throat. Thank you for your candor, Mrs. Figg, Amelia said, her official tone returning. We'll need to proceed to the Dursley residence now. Would you mind if Mr. Weasley remained here briefly? He can monitor our situation and summon additional help if needed. The squib nodded, seemingly relieved that someone was finally taking action. Stay as long as you need. Number 4 is 3 houses down on the right. As Arthur settled into wait, the 3 witches stepped out into the stifling summer afternoon. Privet Drive was painfully ordinary, identical houses with identical gardens lined up in perfect, soulless symmetry. Merlin, it's depressing, Molly muttered as they walked. No wonder Harry loves the burrow. Remember, Amelia cautioned, we proceed officially and calmly. Mrs. Weasley, you and Healer Abernathy make initial contact. I'll disillusion myself and remain close. If there's any trouble, send up red sparks. With that, the head of magical law enforcement tapped herself with her wand and faded from view, though a slight shimmer in the air betrayed her continuing presence. Molly straightened her muggle dress, a floral print that was several decades out of fashion but at least recognizable as non-magical attire, and approached the door of number 4 with Eliza beside her. She took a deep breath, summoning the courage that had once made her a formidable opponent even to Death Eaters, and knocked firmly. The door opened to reveal a horse-faced woman with a permanently pinched expression. Petunia Dursley's eyes widened in immediate recognition and alarm. You, she hissed, already trying to close the door. You're one of them. Molly wedged her foot in the gap with surprising speed. Mrs. Dursley, I'm Molly Weasley. My son Ron is friends with Harry at school. This is Healer Abernathy. We've come to check on Harry's welfare. There's nothing wrong with the boy, Petunia snapped, still trying unsuccessfully to close the door. Go away before the neighbors see you. I'm afraid we can't do that, Eliza said, her professional tone carrying authority that made even Petunia hesitate. We have concerns about Harry's living conditions and treatment that require immediate investigation. You have no right. Petunia's voice rose shrilly. That old man Dumbledore said. Dumbledore is not here, Molly interrupted firmly. We are. And we're not leaving without seeing Harry. A heavy tread sounded from inside the house, and Petunia's face paled further. Vernon, she called, her voice suddenly tremulous. Vernon, they're here. A massive man appeared behind Petunia, his face already purpling with anger. Who the blazes are you people? He demanded, taking in their appearances with evident disgust. More freaks from that boys' school. Molly felt her temper flaring dangerously but managed to keep her voice level. Mr. Dursley, we're here on official business regarding your nephew. If you'll allow us inside, we can discuss this privately, away from your neighbor's curious eyes. Vernon's gaze darted to the street, where indeed several curtains had twitched in nearby windows. The threat to his precious normality worked where appeals to decency had failed. 5 minutes, he growled, stepping back reluctantly. And don't touch anything. The interior of number 4 was unnaturally clean and desperately ordinary. Molly's attention was immediately drawn to the numerous photographs displayed on the walls and surfaces, all featuring a large, blond boy at various ages. Not a single image of Harry was visible. "Where is Harry?" she asked, noticing that the house seemed unnaturally quiet. "In his room, where he belongs," Vernon grunted, crossing his arms defensively. "Now state your business and get out." "Our business," Eliza said calmly, "is to assess Harry's physical and emotional well-being. We've received concerning reports about his treatment here." "Reports?" Vernon spluttered. "What reports? Who's been spreading lies about us? That boy is lucky we took him in at all." Molly's patience, already stretched thin, snapped completely. "Lucky?" she repeated, her voice dangerously soft. "Lucky to be starved? Lucky to be locked up? Lucky to sleep in a cupboard?" Petunia gasped, her hand flying to her throat. "How did you? We know everything," Molly bluffed, drawing herself up to her full height, which, while not impressive, was made formidable by the magic crackling almost visibly around her. "Now, I will see Harry. Immediately." Vernon's face went from purple to an alarming shade of puce. "Now see here," but whatever Vernon was about to say was interrupted by the sound of locks, multiple locks, being undone upstairs. Molly's head snapped toward the staircase. "Aunt Petunia." Harry's uncertain voice called down. "Is everything all right? I heard voices." "Harry!" Molly called, already moving toward the stairs. "It's Mrs. Weasley." "Mrs. Weasley?" The surprise and hope in Harry's voice was heartbreaking. A thin face with familiar round glasses peered over the banister, lighting up with disbelief and joy. "Ron's mum. What are you doing here? You get back in your room, boy." Vernon bellowed, lunging forward. What happened next occurred with such speed that later, Molly would have trouble recalling the exact sequence. Vernon's movement toward the stairs triggered several simultaneous reactions. Molly's wand appeared in her hand as though summoned, a bright flash of red light erupted from somewhere near the door, and Vernon Dursley found himself frozen in mid-stride, his body rigid as a board. Amelia Bones shimmered into visibility, her wand trained steadily on Vernon's immobilized form. "That will be quite enough, Mr. Dursley," she said calmly. "Mrs. Weasley, please check on Harry. Healer Abernathy, if you would examine those locks." Petunia shrieked and backed against the wall, but made no move to interfere as Molly rushed up the stairs. At the top, she found Harry staring wide-eyed at the commotion below, his thin frame practically drowning in oversized clothes. "Harry, dear," she said gently, her anger momentarily masked by concern. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine, Mrs. Weasley," he replied automatically, though the dark circles under his eyes and the pronounced sharpness of his cheekbones told a different story. "What's happening? Is Ron okay?" "Ron's fine, dear. He's worried about you." Molly reached out slowly, as though approaching a skittish animal, and placed a hand on his shoulder. She felt him flinch slightly before leaning into the touch. "We've come to check on you. May I see your room?" Harry hesitated, glancing nervously toward the stairs where his uncle stood petrified. It's not very tidy." "That's all right," Molly assured him, following his gaze to what she now realized was a door fitted with no fewer than 5 locks, on the outside, and a small cat flap at the bottom. Her blood boiled, but she kept her expression gentle. "Show me, please." Harry reluctantly led her to the room, pushing open the door to reveal a space that made Molly's heart clench painfully. It was small and sparse, containing a bed with thin, worn blankets, a rickety desk, and a wardrobe with a broken door. Hedwig's cage sat by the window, the owl inside looking ruffled and unhappy. "They won't let me let her out," Harry explained, noticing Molly's gaze. "Uncle Vernon says she makes too much noise." "I see," Molly said softly, taking in other details, the loose floorboard under the bed where Harry had evidently hidden some possessions, the lack of personal items, the bars on the window that Fred and George had mentioned, now apparently reinstalled. "And how long have you been kept in here, Harry?" Harry shrugged uncomfortably. "Since I got back from school." They let me out to use the bathroom 3 times a day. And meals? Another shrug. When they remember. Sometimes Aunt Petunia pushes soup through the cat flap. Molly closed her eyes briefly, centering herself to prevent her magic from lashing out in rage. When she opened them, she found Harry watching her with a mixture of embarrassment and apprehension. "It's not so bad," he said quickly. "I'm used to it. And it's better than the cupboard." "The cupboard?" Molly prompted gently, though she already knew the answer. "Under the stairs. That's where I slept until my Hogwarts letter came." He said it matter-of-factly, as though it were the most normal thing in the world. Footsteps on the stairs saved Molly from having to respond. Eliza appeared in the doorway, her professional demeanor slipping slightly as she took in the room. "Hello, Harry," she said, recovering quickly. "I'm Healer Abernathy. Would you mind if I performed a quick examination to make sure you're healthy?" Harry looked uncertainly at Molly, who nodded encouragingly. "It's all right, dear. Healer Abernathy is here to help." "I suppose that's okay," Harry agreed hesitantly. "Excellent. It won't hurt at all," Eliza promised, drawing her wand. "Just a simple diagnostic charm. Molly, perhaps you could attend to Harry's belongings while I work?" Understanding the request for privacy, Molly nodded. "Of course. Harry, where are your school things? And Hedwig will need her cage cleaned." As Harry directed her to the cupboard under the stairs where his trunk was locked away, Molly descended to find Amelia interrogating the Dursleys in the living room. Vernon had been partially released from the body bind, but appeared to be under some compulsion to answer truthfully, his face contorted with the effort of resistance. Necessary for his own protection, he was saying through gritted teeth. "The boy is unnatural. Dangerous. And you believed locking a child in a room and starving him was an appropriate response to accidental magic?" Amelia asked coolly. "We never asked for him." Petunia burst out, her face blotchy with emotion. "Dumbledore just left him on our doorstep with a letter, telling us we had to take him. Said we'd be in danger if we didn't. Said there were protections as long as he called this place home." Amelia's expression didn't change, but Molly saw a flash of something, surprise, perhaps, or confirmation, in her eyes. "Nonetheless, Mrs. Dursley, you accepted responsibility for a child. Your treatment of that child constitutes serious neglect under both magical and Muggle law." "You can't prove anything," Vernon blustered, though his confidence seemed brittle. "It'll be our word against his." "Actually," Amelia corrected him, "magical law enforcement doesn't rely on testimony alone. Healer Abernathy is currently conducting a full medical evaluation that will record every injury, every instance of malnutrition, and every trauma Harry has experienced under your roof. This record is magically sealed and cannot be altered or disputed." The color drained from Vernon's face. "Furthermore," Amelia continued relentlessly, "we have testimony from multiple witnesses, including your neighbor Mrs. Fig, who has documented Harry's condition over several years." "That old bat?" Vernon exploded. "She's one of you too. Mrs. Fig is what we call a squib, born to magical parents but without magic herself," Amelia explained coldly. "And yes, she has been watching. Rather ineffectively, it seems, but watching nonetheless." Molly, having heard enough, moved toward the cupboard under the stairs. The small door was secured with a padlock, which she opened with a quick alhambra. Inside, she found Harry's school trunk, his broomstick, and various other magical items crammed into a space that was horrifyingly small, barely large enough for a child to lie down in. Stains on the thin mattress that still occupied one side of the cupboard spoke of years of use. A child-drawn picture was stuck to the inside of the door with peeling tape, the words, "Harry's room," written in uneven crayon letters. Molly had to lean against the wall, momentarily overcome. This was where Harry Potter, the boy who lived, savior of the wizarding world, had spent 10 years of his life. This was what Albus Dumbledore had consigned him to in the name of protection. "Mrs. Weasley?" Harry's voice came from above. He stood at the top of the stairs with Eliza behind him, her face grave. Is everything okay? Molly straightened, forcing a smile. Yes, dear. Just collecting your things. We'll be leaving soon. Leaving? Hope and disbelief warred on Harry's face. You mean? I can come with you. If you want to, Molly said, watching his expression carefully. Harry broke off, seemingly unable to process the offer. But what about? Dumbledore said I had to stay here. Something about protection and my mother's sacrifice. Amelia stepped into the hallway, her official demeanor softening slightly as she addressed Harry directly. Mr. Potter, I'm Amelia Bones, head of magical law enforcement. While there may indeed be magical protections at work here, they do not supersede your right to safety and proper care. We will be removing you from this home immediately, and alternative arrangements will be made that account for both your physical welfare and magical protection. So I don't have to come back. Ever? Harry asked, his voice small but hopeful. That remains to be determined through proper legal channels, Amelia replied carefully. But I can promise you will not return to these conditions. Behind Amelia, Vernon seemed to recover some of his bluster. Now see here. The boy is our responsibility. You can't just take him. Actually, Mr. Dursley, Amelia said without turning around, I have here an emergency custody order signed by the Minister of Magic himself, temporarily transferring guardianship of Harry to the Department of Magical Child Services. She finally turned to face him, her monocle glinting dangerously. Would you care to contest this order? I should warn you that doing so would require a full investigation into your treatment of Mr. Potter, conducted in both magical and muggle courts. Vernon's mouth opened and closed silently, resembling nothing so much as a beached fish gasping for water. I thought not, Amelia concluded with grim satisfaction. Healer Abernathy, your findings. Eliza had descended the stairs and now stood beside Harry, one hand resting protectively on his shoulder. Multiple indications of long-term malnutrition, she reported clinically, though her eyes blazed with professional outrage. Growth stunting, vitamin deficiencies, evidence of improperly healed fractures predating his time at Hogwarts. Additionally, clear signs of psychological distress consistent with prolonged neglect and emotional abuse. With each item in the litany, Petunia seemed to shrink further into herself, while Vernon's face cycled through various shades of red and purple. Those are lies, he finally exploded. We never laid a hand on the boy. Physical violence isn't the only form of abuse, Mr. Dursley, Eliza replied coldly. Starvation, confinement, and neglect leave their own marks. Harry, Molly said gently, turning from the increasingly heated exchange. Why don't we get your things together? Ron will be thrilled to see you. Harry nodded eagerly, clearly relieved to have something to do. Together they gathered his possessions from both the cupboard and his room, which amounted to depressingly little, his Hogwarts supplies, a few sets of massively oversized clothes, and Hedwig in her cage. Is this everything? Molly asked, looking around the barren room. Everything that matters, Harry confirmed, clutching his wand like a lifeline. Can we go now? Downstairs, Amelia was concluding her official business. We'll be in contact regarding further proceedings. Until then, you are forbidden from discussing this matter with anyone, magical or muggle. This gag order is magically binding, attempts to violate it will result in immediate notification to my office. You can't do this, Petunia said weakly, all pretense of indignation gone. What about the protection? He said we'd all be in danger if the boy left. That concern will be addressed, Amelia assured her without sympathy. In the meantime, I suggest you consider your legal position carefully. Cooperation moving forward may mitigate the consequences you face. Molly guided Harry down the stairs, his meager possessions shrunk and tucked into pockets, Hedwig's cage held carefully in his hands. The Dursleys fell silent as they appeared, Petunia looking away while Vernon glared impotently. We're ready, Molly announced, positioning herself protectively between Harry and his relatives. Amelia nodded briskly. Very well. Mrs. Weasley will take Harry to her home temporarily while arrangements are formalized. Healer Abernathy will accompany them to provide any necessary treatment. I will complete the documentation here and join you shortly. As they moved toward the door, Harry hesitated, looking back at his aunt and uncle with an unreadable expression. For a moment, Molly feared he might want to say goodbye, to seek some closure from the people who had so grievously failed him. Instead, he simply turned away without a word and stepped out into the sunlight, his shoulders visibly lightening as the door closed behind him. They walked in silence back to Mrs. Figg's house, where Arthur waited anxiously. His face broke into a relieved smile when he saw Harry, quickly followed by shock at the boy's obvious state of malnourishment. Harry. Good to see you, son, he said, carefully keeping his tone light despite the anger evident in his eyes. Ready for a proper Weasley welcome? For the first time since they'd arrived, Harry smiled, a small, uncertain thing, but genuine nonetheless. More than ready, Mr. Weasley. Excellent. The twins have been planning mischief all morning in anticipation. Arthur clapped his hands together. Mrs. Figg has kindly connected her fireplace to the Floo network temporarily. Have you traveled by Floo before, Harry? Harry shook his head, looking apprehensive. Nothing to worry about, Molly assured him. I'll go with you. Just hold tight to me and we'll be at the burrow in no time. As they prepared to depart, Eliza pulled Molly aside briefly. He'll need careful handling, she murmured. Nutritional potions, certainly, but also space to process. Children from these situations often feel guilty or responsible somehow. We'll take care of him, Molly promised fiercely. As we should have done from the beginning. Eliza nodded, satisfied. I'll follow with a treatment plan. And Molly? What you've done today, not many would have had the courage to challenge Dumbledore's arrangements, even indirectly. Molly's expression hardened. Any parent worth their salt would have done the same. And believe me, Dumbledore hasn't heard the last of this. Not by a long shot. Minutes later, Molly stepped through the green flames with Harry held tightly against her side, emerging into the warm chaos of the Burrow's kitchen where the Weasley children waited anxiously. As Harry blinked soot from his eyes and took in the ramshackle, magic-filled home that couldn't have been more different from Privet Drive, his face transformed with wonder and relief. Welcome home, Harry, Molly said softly, and knew in her heart that whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever confrontations with Dumbledore, whatever legal battles with the Dursleys, whatever magical protections needed re-establishing, this moment made it all worthwhile. The boy who lived had finally escaped a different kind of dark prison, and while Molly couldn't change the past 11 years, she could damn well ensure the years ahead would be different. In the corner of the kitchen, the old family clock chimed softly as a new hand appeared on its face, labeled simply, Harry. The hand pointed steadily to, home. In a castle far to the north, alarms began to sound in the headmaster's office. Magical instruments whirred and puffed, signaling the collapse of carefully placed wards and protections. Albus Dumbledore looked up from his desk, blue eyes widening with alarm as he recognized the significance of the disruption. By the time he arrived in Surrey, it would already be 6 hours too late. The boy who lived had left Privet Drive, and nothing would ever be the same again. Chapter 2, Blood and Bonds. The burrow erupted in controlled chaos the moment Harry and Molly emerged from the fireplace. Fred and George immediately flanked Harry like royal guards, while Ron pushed forward with an expression caught between elation and worry. Ginny hovered at the periphery, her eyes wide but her customary shyness around Harry amplified tenfold. Blimey, Harry, Ron breathed, taking in his friend's appearance. You look terrible. Ronald. Molly scolded, but Harry let out a small laugh. Thanks, mate. Good to see you too. Percy stepped forward with uncharacteristic gentleness. Potter, your room is prepared upstairs. You'll be sharing with Ron, as usual. My room? Harry repeated, as though the concept was foreign. Of course, dear, Molly said, guiding him toward a kitchen chair. But let's get you settled first. Are you hungry? Before Harry could answer, the fireplace flared green again as Arthur arrived, followed moments later by Healer Abernathy. The kitchen was becoming crowded, but nobody seemed inclined to move away. Give him space, children, Arthur instructed, though his tone remained gentle. Harry's had quite a day. The twins reluctantly backed away, though Fred, or possibly George, added, "We've got big plans for later, Harry. Operation Dursley Vengeance is already in development." "Boys," Arthur warned, though without much conviction. Harry looked overwhelmed, his thin fingers still clutching Hedwig's cage. The owl gave a soft hoot, drawing his attention. "Can I let her out?" he asked hesitantly. "She's been locked up all summer." "Of course." Ron answered before his parents could. "Here, I'll do it." As Ron took the cage and moved toward the window, Healer Abernathy approached Harry with a kind smile. "Now that we're somewhere more comfortable, I'd like to do a more thorough examination, if that's all right. And perhaps start you on some nutritional potions." Harry glanced at Molly, who nodded encouragingly. "It's for the best, dear. Healer Abernathy can help undo some of what those people did." "All right," Harry agreed quietly. "Will it take long? I don't want to be a bother." "You're never a bother, Harry," Arthur said firmly, exchanging a pained look with his wife over Harry's head. "This is what families do, they take care of each other." The word families seemed to catch Harry off guard. He blinked rapidly several times, his gaze fixed on the worn wooden table. "Let's use Percy's room for the examination," Molly suggested, noticing Harry's discomfort at being the center of attention. "It's the quietest." Percy nodded immediately. "I've just tidied it this morning. Everything's in perfect order." As Molly led Harry and the healer upstairs, Arthur turned to his remaining children with an unusually serious expression. "We need to talk about Harry's situation. What you've likely guessed is true, his relatives have been mistreating him badly. When he returns, I expect all of you to be sensitive to that, understood?" The Weasley children nodded solemnly, even the twins dropping their usual mischievous demeanor. "Does this mean he's staying with us for good?" Ron asked hopefully. Arthur sighed. "It's complicated, son. There are magical protections involved that we don't fully understand yet. But for now, yes, Harry will remain here while everything gets sorted." "What kind of protections?" Percy asked with a prefect's curiosity about rules and regulations. "Something to do with his mother's sacrifice and blood relatives," Arthur explained, keeping his voice low. "Dumbledore set it up. We're expecting him to arrive once he discovers Harry's been removed." Fred, definitely Fred this time, frowned. If Dumbledore knew how they were treating Harry, why did he leave him there? "That," Arthur said grimly, "is exactly what we intend to ask him." Upstairs in Percy's meticulously organized bedroom, Harry sat uncomfortably on the edge of the perfectly made bed while Healer Abernathy waved her wand in complex patterns around him. Molly stood nearby, her arms crossed and expression troubled as she watched multicolored lights shimmer briefly over Harry's thin form. "I'm going to speak frankly, Mr. Potter," the healer said finally, lowering her wand. "You're significantly malnourished and showing signs of stunted growth that will require intervention if you're to reach your proper height. There are also several poorly healed injuries that should be addressed." Harry stared at his trainers, which were falling apart at the seams. "It's not that bad. I've always been small." "Because you've been systematically underfed," Eliza corrected gently. "But the good news is that you're young enough for us to correct most of the damage. With proper nutrition, targeted potions, and regular care, you should catch up to where you should be within a year or so." Molly made a small sound that she quickly disguised as a cough. 1 year to undo 11 years of neglect. The thought made her chest ache. "Will it hurt?" Harry asked, still not looking up. "The treatment, I mean." "Some discomfort perhaps, especially when we reset those old fractures," Eliza admitted. "But nothing unbearable, and we can provide pain relief." The nutritional regimen will actually make you feel better almost immediately. Harry nodded, accepting this with the same quiet resignation that had characterized his reaction to everything since they'd arrived at Privet Drive. Molly found herself longing to see some spark of the spirited boy Ron had described from their Hogwarts adventures. "Harry, dear," she said gently, sitting beside him on the bed. "You know none of this was your fault, don't you?" He looked up at her then, genuine confusion in his green eyes. "I know the Dursleys are not nice people. But Dumbledore must have had reasons for putting me there. Important ones." "Whatever his reasons," Molly said firmly, "they don't justify how you were treated. No child deserves that, Harry. No child." Harry seemed to struggle with this concept, his brow furrowed in concentration as though she presented him with a particularly challenging transfiguration problem. Before he could respond, there was a commotion from downstairs, raised voices, then a sudden hush that felt more ominous than the noise had been. "It seems our expected visitor has arrived," Eliza observed, corking a vial of swirling blue liquid she'd extracted from her bag. "Molly, Mr. Potter should drink this nutritional potion now, and another before bed. I'll leave a week's supply and detailed instructions before I go." "Thank you, Eliza," Molly said, taking the vial. "Harry, drink this, please. Then we should probably go downstairs." Harry obediently swallowed the potion, making a face at the taste but not complaining. As they stood to leave, he suddenly reached out and caught Molly's hand. "Mrs. Weasley," he said quietly, "thank you for coming to get me. No one's ever." He trailed off, unable to finish. Molly felt her eyes filling with tears. Without thinking, she pulled Harry into a gentle hug, mindful of his fragile state. For a moment he stiffened, clearly unused to physical affection, before hesitantly returning the embrace. "You're welcome, dear," she whispered. "I only wish we'd done it sooner." The kitchen of the Burrow had never felt so crowded nor so tense. Albus Dumbledore stood near the fireplace, his normally twinkling blue eyes grave as he surveyed the assembly before him. Arthur stood with arms crossed by the table, while Amelia Bones occupied a chair with the rigid posture of someone prepared for battle. The Weasley children had been banished to the garden, though suspicious movement behind the window suggested the twins at least were attempting to eavesdrop. "Arthur, Amelia," Dumbledore greeted them, his voice carrying its usual gentle authority, though perhaps with an additional note of weariness. "I see we have much to discuss." "Indeed we do, Albus," Amelia replied coolly. "Starting with why the savior of the wizarding world was found locked in a bedroom, half-starved, and showing signs of long-term abuse and neglect." Dumbledore sighed heavily, suddenly looking every one of his considerable years. "May I sit? This explanation will take some time." Arthur gestured to a chair, his usual deference to the headmaster notably diminished. "By all means." As Dumbledore settled himself, footsteps on the stairs announced Molly's return with Harry and Eliza. Harry faltered momentarily when he saw Dumbledore, an expression of mingled respect, confusion, and, most troublingly, apprehension crossing his face. "Harry," Dumbledore said softly, rising again. "I'm glad to see you safe." "Professor," Harry nodded, unconsciously moving closer to Molly's side. "Am I in trouble?" "No, my boy, not at all," Dumbledore assured him. "Though I must admit to some concern about your premature departure from your aunt and uncle's home." "Premature?" Molly repeated incredulously. "Albus, surely you're not suggesting he should have remained in that prison?" "Not under the conditions you discovered, certainly," Dumbledore conceded. "But there are complexities here that must be addressed." "Then address them," Amelia said firmly. "Starting with why you placed Mr. Potter with those muggles in the first place, and why you left him there despite evidence of mistreatment." Dumbledore looked at Harry, his expression softening. "Harry, perhaps it would be best if he stays," Arthur interrupted firmly. "Whatever you have to say affects Harry most of all. He has a right to hear it directly." Dumbledore seemed about to object, then nodded slowly. "Very well. Harry, what I'm about to explain involves your mother's final sacrifice and the ancient magic it invoked. Harry straightened slightly, his attention captured by the mention of his mother. He took a seat at the table, Molly remaining protectively beside him. When your mother died to protect you, Dumbledore began, she invoked one of the oldest and most powerful forms of magic known, a sacrificial protection born of pure love. This protection lives in your very skin, your blood, and by extension, in the blood of your mother's family. You mean the Dursleys? Harry asked, frowning. But they hate magic. They hate me. Their feelings toward you, regrettable as they are, do not negate the blood connection, Dumbledore explained. When I placed you with Petunia, I established powerful wards based on that shared blood. As long as you could call her home your home, those wards protected you from Voldemort and his followers. They could not touch you there. So you knew, Molly said quietly, dangerously. You knew how they were treating him, and you left him there anyway. For protection. Dumbledore met her gaze steadily. I knew they would never fully embrace him as their own. I did not know the extent of their neglect. I had Arabella Figg watching, reporting, and what exactly did she report? Amelia interrupted. Because she told us she informed you multiple times about concerns. A flash of something, discomfort, perhaps even guilt, crossed Dumbledore's face. She reported that Harry was not treated as well as their own son. That he was made to do chores, that they were not, demonstratively affectionate. That's putting it rather mildly, Eliza interjected, speaking for the first time. Headmaster, my diagnostic spells revealed malnutrition consistent with years of food deprivation, multiple untreated injuries, and signs of psychological distress associated with prolonged emotional abuse. This goes far beyond a lack of affection. I see, Dumbledore said quietly. I miscalculated. Miscalculated? Arthur repeated incredulously. Albus, they kept him in a cupboard. They put bars on his windows. They were starving him. Harry shifted uncomfortably, clearly distressed by being discussed so clinically. It's okay, Mr. Weasley. I survived. That's not the point, Harry, Molly said gently. Merely surviving isn't enough. You deserve to be cared for, to be safe, to be happy. The blood protection, Dumbledore began again, but Amelia cut him off. The blood protection kept him safe from Death Eaters, Albus, but not from those who were supposed to care for him. What good is protecting a child from external threats if he's being harmed within his supposed sanctuary? Dumbledore removed his half-moon spectacles and pinched the bridge of his crooked nose. You must understand the precarious position we were in. With Voldemort's followers still at large, many seeking vengeance, there were other options, Arthur insisted. Other families who would have taken him in. Who would have protected him? Families like yours, Arthur. Dumbledore asked gently. Would you have been prepared to face the Death Eaters who would inevitably have traced him here? To put your own children at risk? The question hung in the air, heavy with implication. Harry looked stricken. Yes, Molly answered before Arthur could, her voice unwavering. Yes, we would have. That's what families do, Albus. They protect each other, all of each other, not just from outside dangers but from loneliness and cruelty and despair as well. Harry stared at her, something like wonder dawning in his expression. A noble sentiment, Molly, Dumbledore acknowledged. But without the blood wards, there are other forms of protection, Amelia interjected. The Fidelius charm, for one. Alternative wards. Magical guardianship bonds. The Department of Mysteries has research on protective magic that could have been adapted. All inferior to the protection Lily's sacrifice provided, Dumbledore insisted. That's a matter for debate, Eliza countered. And one that should have been weighed against the clear harm being done to the boy. Harry, who had been following the conversation with increasing discomfort, finally spoke up. What happens now? Do I have to go back? The question silenced everyone. All eyes turned to Harry, whose small frame seemed to shrink further under the attention. "No," Molly said immediately, placing a protective hand on his shoulder. "Absolutely not. The blood protection requires you to call your aunt's house home," Dumbledore said carefully. Without it, we'll find other ways to keep Harry safe," Arthur finished firmly. "Ways that don't require him to suffer abuse." Dumbledore studied Harry for a long moment, his blue eyes unusually somber. "Harry, I owe you an apology. It seems in my focus on keeping you alive, I failed to ensure you were living well. That was a grievous error in judgment." Harry blinked, clearly surprised by the admission. "Sir. When I left you with your aunt and uncle, I hoped that despite their known dislike of magic, blood ties and basic human decency would ensure you were treated, if not with love, then at least with care," Dumbledore continued. "I left a letter explaining everything, the sacrifice your parents made, the importance of the protection, the likelihood that Voldemort would someday return. Perhaps I placed too much faith in that explanation. Or perhaps," Amelia said dryly, "you should have checked on him more than once in 10 years. Dumbledore inclined his head, accepting the rebuke. "Perhaps so. The question remains," Arthur pressed, "what happens now? The blood wards have presumably fallen with Harry's removal from Privet Drive." "Not immediately," Dumbledore corrected. "They will weaken gradually over the coming weeks if Harry does not return. By summer's end, they will have collapsed completely." "Good," Molly said flatly. "Then we have time to establish alternative protections." Dumbledore looked at her with something like respect mingled with concern. "You understand that taking Harry in permanently would place your family at considerable risk?" "We already told you we're prepared for that," Arthur replied. "Unless Harry would prefer another arrangement." All eyes turned to Harry again, who looked overwhelmed by the notion that his preference mattered. I'd like to stay here," he said quietly. "If that's really okay." "More than okay, dear," Molly assured him, fighting back tears. "Then it seems a decision has been made," Amelia declared. "As head of magical law enforcement, I am officially recording that Harry Potter has been removed from an abusive household and temporarily placed with the Weasley family pending formal foster care arrangements. Headmaster Dumbledore, as the person who originally placed Mr. Potter with the Dursleys, you will need to provide a full accounting to the Wisengamot regarding that decision." Dumbledore nodded gravely. "I understand, Amelia. And I will cooperate fully." In the meantime, Eliza interjected, "Mr. Potter requires a strict regimen of nutritional potions and healing treatments to address the physical effects of his mistreatment. I've prepared a schedule and supplies for Molly, and I'll be checking in regularly to monitor his progress." "Thank you, Healer Abernathy," Dumbledore said sincerely. "I'm grateful for your expertise in this matter." "I do have one question," Harry said hesitantly, drawing everyone's attention. "The blood protection, my mother's sacrifice, does this mean it won't work anymore? That what she did doesn't matter now?" The vulnerability in his voice struck everyone silent for a moment. Dumbledore was the first to recover. "Harry, what your mother did, the protection she gave you through her love and sacrifice, that lives inside you, always. The specific ward magic I established at Privet Drive may fade, but the core protection, the reason Voldemort couldn't touch you, that remains." Harry nodded, visibly relieved. "So she didn't, it wasn't for nothing." "Never for nothing, dear boy," Dumbledore said softly. "Lily Potter's love saved you once, and it lives on in ways we are only beginning to understand." A weight seemed to lift from Harry's shoulders at these words. Molly, noticing his exhaustion despite his efforts to remain engaged, stepped in. "I think that's enough for today," she announced in a tone that brooked no argument. "Harry needs rest and food, and we can continue these discussions tomorrow." "Of course," Amelia agreed, standing. "I'll begin the paperwork for temporary magical guardianship and arrange interviews with the Dursleys through proper channels. And I should return to Hogwarts to begin researching alternative protections," Dumbledore added, rising as well. "With your permission, I'd like to visit again tomorrow to discuss possibilities." Arthur nodded stiffly. That would be acceptable. Around midday, perhaps. As the adults made their arrangements, Harry found himself fighting to keep his eyes open. The events of the day, combined with the nutritional potion beginning to work through his system, had left him utterly drained. He barely noticed when Molly gently guided him from his chair and up the stairs to Ron's room, where a bed had been prepared for him. "Rest now, dear," she said softly as he sank onto the mattress. "Things will look brighter in the morning." Harry wanted to thank her, to express the jumble of emotions swirling through him, but exhaustion claimed him before he could form the words. The last thing he registered was the unfamiliar sensation of being tucked in, a gentle hand brushing hair from his forehead, and the soft click of a door being left slightly ajar, not locked, not barred, just open enough to let in a sliver of hallway light. Ron crept into his bedroom an hour later, careful not to wake his sleeping friend. He paused by Harry's bed, frowning at how small Harry looked curled under the blankets. Even in sleep, Harry's posture seemed defensive, his body turned inward as though protecting vital parts from harm. "He all right?" came a whisper from the doorway. Fred and George stood there, for once looking entirely serious. Ron shrugged helplessly. "Dunno. He's been through a lot." "We heard some of it," George admitted. "Extendable ears prototype. Not perfect yet, but we caught enough." "Those muggles," Fred said darkly. "They deserve more than just magical punishment." "Dumbledore knew," Ron said, his voice tight with an anger he rarely displayed. "He knew and he left Harry there anyway." The twins exchanged a look laden with meaning. "Mom and Dad won't stand for that," George said with certainty. "Did you see Dad's face? I've never seen him so angry, not even when we nearly got caught by those muggles in Dad's flying car." "What do you think will happen now?" Ron asked, settling onto his own bed. "Will Harry stay with us?" "Hope so," Fred said firmly. "He belongs here." "You lot planning a slumber party?" Ginny's quiet voice joined the conversation as she appeared behind the twins, her eyes immediately finding Harry's sleeping form. "Just checking on Harry," George explained. "You should be in bed, Gin." Ginny ignored her brother, slipping past him into the room. She approached Harry's bed hesitantly, her usual shyness momentarily forgotten in concern. "I heard Mom telling Dad that Harry's relatives kept him in a cupboard," she whispered. "For years." Ron nodded grimly. "Didn't feed him properly either. That's why he's so skinny." Ginny's brown eyes flashed with a surprising fierceness. "That's not right. Nobody should treat anyone like that, especially not Harry." "We know, Gin," Fred said gently. "That's why he's here now." A small sound from Harry made them all freeze. He stirred slightly, his brow furrowing in what appeared to be distress. Before any of them could decide whether to wake him, Molly appeared in the doorway. "What are you all doing in here?" she whispered sharply. "Harry needs rest, not an audience." "We were just," Ron began. "Checking on him, I know," Molly interrupted, her expression softening. "It's good that you care. But right now the best thing you can do is let him sleep. Tomorrow will be time enough for questions and conversations." The siblings reluctantly filed out, Ginny casting one last concerned look at Harry before following her brothers. Molly remained, watching as Harry settled again, his face relaxing back into sleep. The protective surge she felt looking at him was indistinguishable from what she experienced with her own children. In that moment, she knew with absolute certainty that she would fight anyone, even Albus Dumbledore, even the Ministry itself, to keep him safe. With that resolve firmly in her heart, she quietly closed the door and headed downstairs, where Arthur waited to discuss their next steps in this unexpected battle they'd found themselves fighting. Harry woke disoriented, momentarily panicked by unfamiliar surroundings. Orange assaulted his vision, walls, bedspread, even the light streaming through the window had an orange quality to it. Then memory returned, the Weasleys, the rescue, the confrontation with Dumbledore. He was at the burrow, in Ron's room. He sat up carefully, reaching for his glasses on the bedside table. The room came into focus, revealing Ron still fast asleep in the other bed, mouth slightly open and snoring softly. The normalcy of the scene struck Harry as almost absurdly wonderful after weeks of isolation at Privet Drive. Testing his limbs, Harry was surprised to find he felt different. The constant gnawing hunger that had been his companion all summer had subsided to a more normal appetite. His body still ached, but the bone-deep exhaustion had lifted somewhat. The healer's potion, he realized, was already having an effect. The smells of breakfast drifted up from downstairs, bacon and eggs and something sweet, making Harry's stomach rumble appreciatively. He slipped out of bed, noting that someone had laid out clothes for him on a chair. Not Dudley's enormous cast-offs, but what appeared to be properly sized garments, if somewhat worn. He changed quickly, marveling at the simple pleasure of pants that didn't need to be rolled up multiple times and a shirt that didn't hang to his knees. Thus prepared, he padded quietly from the room, leaving Ron to his slumber. Navigating the Warren-like passages of the burrow proved challenging. Twice Harry found himself in what appeared to be closets, and once he opened a door to what was clearly Ginny's room, retreating hastily when he spotted her still sleeping. Finally, he followed the sounds and smells downstairs to the kitchen, where he found Molly already cooking while Arthur sat at the table reviewing what appeared to be official documents. "Harry, dear!" Molly exclaimed upon noticing him hovering uncertainly in the doorway. "You're up early. How did you sleep?" "Really well, thank you," Harry replied truthfully. It had been the deepest sleep he'd had in weeks, unmarred by the usual nightmares. "Excellent. Sit, sit," Molly urged, gesturing to the table. "Breakfast is nearly ready, and you need to take your morning potions." Harry slid into a chair, still feeling slightly out of place despite the Weasleys' warmth. "Is there anything I can do to help?" Arthur looked up from his papers, his expression kind but concerned. "Just focus on regaining your strength, Harry. There'll be plenty of time for helping out once Healer Abernathy gives you the all-clear." "I'm not an invalid," Harry objected mildly. "I'm used to doing chores." "That's exactly the problem," Molly said, placing a glass of pumpkin juice and 2 potion vials before him. "You're used to doing far too much. For now, your only job is to rest, eat, and heal." Harry wanted to argue further but found himself unable to counter the genuine care in Molly's voice. Instead, he obediently downed the potions, grimacing at the taste but immediately feeling a warming sensation spread through his limbs. "Those clothes fit all right?" Arthur asked, changing the subject as he noted Harry's attire. "They're Bill's old things. Closest to your build, we thought." "They're perfect," Harry said sincerely. "Thank you. We'll need to get you properly outfitted soon," Molly said, placing a plate before Harry that contained more food than he'd typically see in a day at the Dursleys. "But these will do for now." Harry stared at the mountain of eggs, bacon, sausages, and toast with a mixture of appreciation and apprehension. "I don't think I can eat all this." "Just eat what you can, dear," Molly advised. "Your stomach will have shrunk from being underfed. The nutritional potions will help stimulate your appetite gradually." Harry nodded and began eating slowly, savoring each bite. Arthur returned to his paperwork, occasionally making notes with a quill that seemed to change color according to the nature of what he was writing. "What are you working on, Mr. Weasley?" Harry asked between bites, genuinely curious. Arthur glanced up with a small smile. "Guardianship paperwork, actually. Temporary magical fostering requires quite a bit of documentation." Harry's fork froze halfway to his mouth. "Guardianship? You mean, for me?" "Of course for you," Molly said, joining them at the table with her own plate. "Did you think we'd go to all the trouble of rescuing you only to leave your situation unresolved?" I didn't think." Harry struggled to articulate the complex emotions churning within him. "You don't have to do this. I know it's dangerous, with Voldemort and everything." Arthur and Molly exchanged a look that Harry couldn't quite interpret. "Harry," Arthur said finally, setting his quill down. We want to be very clear about this. We're not doing this out of obligation or pity. We're doing this because we care about you, and because it's the right thing to do. But Dumbledore said there could be Death Eaters. Dumbledore isn't always right, Molly interrupted gently. He admitted as much yesterday. He made a mistake leaving you with those people, no matter what his reasons were. Harry absorbed this, struggling with the idea that Dumbledore, the most powerful wizard he knew, the man he'd come to see as almost infallible, could have been wrong about something so fundamental. The blood protection, he said slowly. It really was keeping me safe. From certain threats, yes, Arthur acknowledged. But at too high a cost. There are other ways to protect you, Harry. Ways that don't require you to suffer. Like what? Well, that's what we'll be discussing with Dumbledore later today, Arthur explained. There are various magical protections available, wards, charms, bonds. None perhaps as powerful individually as your mother's blood protection, but combined, they can create a formidable defense. Harry nodded, processing this information as he continued eating, surprised to find his appetite growing rather than diminishing as the meal progressed. A comfortable silence fell, broken only when the rest of the Weasley children began to appear one by one, each greeting Harry with varying degrees of enthusiasm, Ron and the twins, or shy acknowledgement, Ginny. Percy, as usual, was the most formal. Good morning, Potter. I trust you found your accommodations satisfactory. Yes, thanks Percy, Harry replied, fighting a smile at the prefect's officiousness. Excellent. I've taken the liberty of drawing up a study schedule to help you catch up on the summer homework you've missed. Given your circumstances, at your relative's home, I assume you've had limited opportunity for academic pursuits. Percy. Ron groaned. He's only been here one day. Give him a break. Education waits for no one, Ronald, Percy sniffed. And Potter will thank me when he's not scrambling to complete everything the night before term begins, as you inevitably will. Before Ron could retort, Fred and George created a diversion by simultaneously attempting to levitate the marmalade jar, resulting in a minor explosion of sticky orange preserves. As Molly scolded them and set about cleaning the mess with practiced flicks of her wand, Harry found himself observing the controlled chaos of the Weasley breakfast with a strange mixture of bewilderment and delight. This, he realized, was what a family was supposed to be like, noisy, occasionally irritating, but fundamentally bound by genuine affection and shared experiences. The thought brought a lump to his throat that made swallowing the last of his pumpkin juice difficult. All right there, Harry? Ron asked, noticing his friend's sudden stillness. Harry nodded, not trusting himself to speak immediately. When he finally found his voice, he simply said, I'm just, really glad to be here. Ron looked momentarily confused, then understanding dawned on his freckled face. Yeah, well. You should be here all the time, really. Makes more sense. It was such a typically Ron way of expressing complex emotions that Harry couldn't help but smile. Yeah. It does. By mid-morning, Harry had settled into a comfortable routine at the Burrow. After breakfast, Healer Abernathy had returned for a follow-up examination, pronouncing herself cautiously pleased with his initial response to the potions. She had then engaged in a private consultation with Molly and Arthur, leaving Harry to join Ron, Fred, and George in degenoming the garden, a task that, despite being classified as a chore, felt more like entertainment than work. You've got a natural talent for this, Harry, Fred observed as Harry sent a particularly ugly gnome sailing over the hedge. Good rotation on the throw. Thanks, Harry grinned, feeling more relaxed than he had in months. The physical activity, combined with the fresh air and companionship, was proving remarkably therapeutic. So, George said casually, cornering a gnome behind a large toadstool, reckon you'll be staying with us permanently then? Harry's smile faltered slightly. I don't know. Your parents are trying to sort it all out. Hope you do, Ron said matter-of-factly. Be brilliant having you here all the time. Wouldn't your parents get tired of having another person around? Harry asked, voicing a fear that had been nagging at him. I mean, there's already 7 of you. The Weasley brothers exchanged incredulous looks. Mate, have you met our mother? Fred asked. She'd adopt half of Hogwarts if Dad let her. Remember that stray measles she took in last winter? George added. Named it, knitted it a sweater, and cried for a week when its owner finally showed up. You're way better than a measle, Ron concluded with impeccable logic. Well, most days. Harry laughed, feeling some of his anxiety ease. Still, I don't want to be a burden. You're not, came a new voice. They turned to find Ginny standing at the garden gate, her cheeks flushed pink either from the summer heat or from addressing Harry directly, possibly both. Mum and Dad want you here. We all do. It was possibly the most words Ginny had strung together in Harry's presence, and her brothers stared at her in surprise. She immediately turned even redder and fled back toward the house. Well, Fred said after a moment, if Ginny's actually speaking in your presence, you must really be part of the family now. Harry felt a warmth spread through him that had nothing to do with the summer sun. Before he could respond, however, they were interrupted by Percy approaching across the lawn with his usual purposeful stride. Potter, there are ministry officials here to speak with you, he announced importantly. In an official capacity regarding your relatives. Harry's good mood evaporated instantly. What kind of officials? Representatives from the Department of Magical Child Welfare and Muggle Relations, Percy replied. They're in the sitting room with Mother and Father. They were most insistent on speaking with you directly. Harry looked to Ron and the twins, suddenly apprehensive. We'll come with you, Ron said immediately. Actually, Percy interjected, they specified that they wished to speak with Potter alone initially, though Mother insisted on remaining present. It's okay, Harry assured his friends, though he felt anything but okay. I'll be fine. With leaden steps, he followed Percy back to the house, trying to prepare himself for whatever new interrogation awaited. In the sitting room, he found a scene that momentarily stopped him in his tracks. Arthur and Molly sat side by side on the worn sofa, their expressions tense. Across from them in conjured chairs sat 3 unfamiliar figures, a severe-looking witch in ministry robes whom Harry vaguely recognized from his brief trip to the ministry the previous year, a younger wizard with a neat beard and compassionate eyes, and most surprisingly, a completely ordinary-looking Muggle woman in a sensible skirt and blouse, who seemed to be trying very hard not to stare at the magical photographs on the walls. Ah, Harry, Arthur said, spotting him in the doorway. Come in, son. These people would like to ask you a few questions about the Dursleys. Harry entered reluctantly, taking the space Molly immediately made for him beside her on the sofa. Her presence was reassuring, though it couldn't completely dispel his unease. Mr. Potter, the severe witch began, I am Madam Elspeth Clearwater, head of the Department of Magical Child Welfare. This is Mr. Julian Fawcett, our liaison to the Muggle Relations Office, and MS. Rebecca Thornton from the Surrey Child Protection Services. Harry nodded silently, unsure how to respond to this formal introduction. Ms. Thornton has been granted temporary clearance regarding magical matters due to the unique circumstances of your case, Madam Clearwater continued. We'll be conducting parallel investigations, magical and Muggle, into your treatment at the Dursley household. Investigations? Harry repeated, tension coiling in his stomach. What does that mean exactly? Mr. Fawcett leaned forward, his manner gentle but direct. It means, Harry, that we need to establish an official record of what happened to you at the Dursleys. This will help determine appropriate legal consequences for them and ensure proper arrangements for your future care. Legal consequences? Harry's voice rose slightly in alarm. You're not going to, they won't go to prison or anything, will they? The 3 officials exchanged significant glances. That depends on the severity of what they did, Ms. Thornton said, speaking for the first time. Her voice was matter-of-fact but kind. Child neglect and abuse are serious offenses in both the magical and non-magical worlds, Harry. But they're muggles, Harry protested. They can't defend themselves against magical laws. Which is why we're conducting dual investigations, Madame Clearwater explained patiently. Any magical penalties would be handled discreetly, while Ms. Thornton's department would address the muggle legal aspects. I don't want this, Harry said, panic rising in his throat. I just wanted to leave. I didn't want to cause trouble. Molly placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. Harry, dear, you aren't causing trouble. The Dursleys did that all on their own by how they treated you. But, perhaps, Mr. Fawcett interjected diplomatically, we should explain the process before proceeding. Harry deserves to understand what's happening. Madame Clearwater nodded briskly. Of course. Mr. Potter, today we simply wish to ask you some questions about your life with the Dursleys. You don't have to answer anything that makes you uncomfortable. Mrs. Weasley can remain with you throughout, and we can take breaks whenever you need. The purpose, Miss Thornton added, is to create a clear picture of your experiences. This isn't about punishment, but about ensuring justice and proper care moving forward. Harry glanced at Molly and Arthur, seeking guidance. Arthur's expression was grim but encouraging, while Molly squeezed his shoulder reassuringly. It's your choice, Harry, she said softly. But these people are trying to help, and, what the Dursleys did was wrong. It shouldn't go unaddressed. Harry took a deep breath, trying to organize his thoughts. Part of him wanted to forget the whole thing, to pretend the cupboard and the bars and the hunger had never happened. But another part, a small voice that had been silenced for too long, whispered that maybe, just maybe, he deserved better than what the Dursleys had given him. Okay, he said finally. I'll answer your questions. But I don't want them to suffer too much. They're not good people, but they took me in when no one else would. Because Dumbledore left them no choice, Molly muttered, though quietly enough that only Harry heard her. Thank you, Harry, Madame Clearwater said, producing a roll of parchment and a quill that hovered ready to record. Let's begin with some basic questions. How long did you live in the cupboard under the stairs? The questioning lasted nearly 2 hours. Harry found himself describing things he'd never spoken of aloud before, the cupboard, the missed meals, the punishments for accidental magic, the constant belittlement and isolation. With each revelation, Molly's grip on his shoulder tightened, her face growing stonier, while the officials maintained professional expressions that couldn't quite hide their dismay. Ms. Thornton's questions were particularly detailed, focusing on aspects Harry had never really considered worth mentioning: how often he saw doctors, never, what happened when he was ill, stayed in his cupboard, whether he had proper winter clothing, Dudley's cast-offs, how his schooling was handled before Hogwarts, minimal encouragement, punishment for outperforming Dudley. By the time they finished, Harry felt emotionally drained but strangely lighter, as though a weight he hadn't known he was carrying had been partially lifted. The officials thanked him for his cooperation, assuring him that the information would be handled with appropriate discretion. What happens now? Arthur asked as they prepared to leave. We'll combine this testimony with Healer Abernathy's medical report and the initial observations from yesterday, Madame Clearwater explained. Then we'll interview the Dursleys, separately, to ensure uninfluenced accounts. I'll be conducting home visits and speaking with neighbors and school officials, Ms. Thornton added. We'll coordinate our findings before determining appropriate actions. And how long will this process take? Molly inquired, her arms still protectively around Harry's shoulders. Several weeks at minimum, Mr. Fawcett admitted. These matters require thoroughness, especially given Mr. Potter's prominence. Harry groaned internally at the reminder of his unwanted fame. Will this be in the papers? He asked, dreading the answer. Absolutely not, Madame Clearwater stated firmly. Minister Fudge himself has classified this matter under the Magical Child Privacy Statutes. The Daily Prophet will not get wind of this from official channels. Harry wasn't entirely reassured, secrets had a way of leaking at the most inconvenient times, but he nodded acceptance nonetheless. As the officials gathered their materials to depart, Dumbledore arrived through the flue, causing a momentary stir. Madame Clearwater regarded him with cool professionalism. Headmaster. We've just concluded our initial interview with Mr. Potter. I see, Dumbledore replied, brushing soot from his midnight blue robes. And your findings? Are confidential at this stage, she responded crisply. Though I will say the preliminary evidence supports the concerns raised by the Weasleys and Healer Abernathy. Dumbledore nodded gravely. As I feared. Please keep me informed of your progress, Elspeth. As Mr. Potter's magical guardian, former magical guardian, Mr. Fawcett corrected gently. Your guardianship has been temporarily suspended pending review, Headmaster. Standard procedure in cases like this. A flash of something, frustration. Concern. Crossed Dumbledore's face before his usual serene expression returned. Of course. Quite appropriate under the circumstances. The officials took their leave shortly thereafter, disappearing through the flue one by one, with Ms. Thornton looking particularly relieved to return to the Muggle world. As the green flames of her departure faded, an awkward silence fell over the sitting room. Well, Dumbledore said finally, his blue eyes finding Harry's. It seems you've had quite a morning, my boy. Harry nodded, suddenly exhausted. The emotional toll of recounting his life with the Dursleys, combined with the lingering effects of years of malnutrition, left him feeling drained. Molly, ever perceptive, noticed immediately. Harry needs rest, Albus. Perhaps you could speak with Arthur first while I get Harry settled. A wise suggestion, Molly, Dumbledore agreed. Harry and I can talk later, when he's feeling stronger. Harry wanted to object, to insist he was fine, that he didn't need special treatment, but found he lacked the energy. Instead, he allowed Molly to guide him upstairs to Ron's room, where she insisted he lie down for a while. Just for an hour, dear, she said firmly. Healer Abernathy was very clear about you needing regular rest periods while your body adjusts to the potions. Too tired to argue, Harry sank onto the bed. Will you tell me what Dumbledore says? About the protection and everything? Molly brushed his hair back from his forehead in a gesture that was becoming familiar. Of course. Nothing about you will be decided without you, Harry. Not anymore. As she quietly left the room, Harry found himself contemplating this promise. Nothing about you without you. Such a simple concept, yet one that had been foreign to his experience until now. His entire life had been determined by others, Voldemort's decision to target his family, Dumbledore's choice to place him with the Dursleys' treatment of him. For the first time, he was being included in decisions about his own life. The thought was both exhilarating and terrifying. As sleep began to claim him, Harry wondered what his parents would think of all this. Would they approve of the Weasleys taking him in? Would they be angry with Dumbledore for leaving him with the Dursleys? Would they be disappointed in him for not somehow being better, stronger, more worthy of proper care? No, a small voice in his mind whispered. They would be angry on your behalf. They would want you safe and happy. They loved you. With that comforting thought, Harry drifted into sleep, unaware that downstairs, his future was being vigorously debated by the adults who had each, in their own way, tried to protect him. The blood protection is not negotiable, Arthur, Dumbledore was saying when Molly rejoined them in the kitchen. It is, quite literally, Harry's strongest defense against Voldemort. And yet you're willing to negotiate now, Arthur countered, his usually mild expression hardened into determination. When before it was apparently so essential that it justified leaving him in an abusive home. Dumbledore sighed heavily. I have already acknowledged my error in not monitoring his situation more closely. But the protection itself remains critically important, especially given what I suspect about Voldemort's current state. Molly tensed at the implication. What do you mean, Albus? Voldemort was defeated. Harry destroyed him. Temporarily displaced would be more accurate, Dumbledore corrected gently. There are indications that Voldemort is not truly gone. Merely weakened, formless perhaps, but seeking to return. The kitchen fell silent as the Weasleys absorbed this chilling information. "You believe he'll come after Harry again?" Arthur said finally. It wasn't a question. "Eventually, yes," Dumbledore confirmed. "Which is why the blood protection is so vital. It prevented Voldemort from touching Harry once before. But it didn't protect him from the Dursleys," Molly pointed out, her voice tight with suppressed emotion. "What good is protection from distant dangers if the immediate environment is harmful?" "A fair point, and one I failed to give proper weight," Dumbledore conceded. "Which is why I'm here to discuss alternatives that might preserve some measure of the protection while ensuring Harry's welfare." "Such as?" Arthur prompted. Dumbledore steepled his fingers thoughtfully. "There are several possibilities, though none as perfect as the original arrangement. The blood protection is strongest when Harry resides with Petunia, but it does not disappear entirely if he merely maintains contact with her. Regular visits, perhaps, or even letters acknowledging the familial connection." "You want him to write to those people?" Molly asked incredulously. "After what they did to him?" "Not for their benefit, but for his protection," Dumbledore clarified. "The magic responds to the acknowledgement of family ties, however reluctant." "There must be another way," Arthur insisted. "What about other blood relatives? Surely Harry has distant magical relations?" "The Potter line has dwindled considerably," Dumbledore said sadly. "And Lily's only blood relation is Petunia. However." He paused, seeming to consider something. "There is another approach we might consider. Blood adoption." "Blood adoption?" Molly repeated, surprise evident in her voice. "But that's incredibly rare magic. The Ministry restricts it severely." "With good reason," Dumbledore nodded. "It creates genuine magical kinship where none existed before. But in extraordinary circumstances, exceptions can be made." "And you think Harry's situation qualifies?" Arthur asked. "I believe it might, especially with Amelia Bones advocating for his case. A partial blood adoption, not replacing his parents, of course, but adding your family's protection to his, could potentially create a new form of blood ward centered here at the Burrow." Molly and Arthur exchanged meaningful glances, a silent conversation passing between them. "We would need to discuss this with Harry," Molly said finally. "And understand exactly what it entails." "Of course," Dumbledore agreed readily. "It would be a significant commitment for all involved. The ritual itself is complex, requiring genuine willingness from all participants. It cannot be coerced or performed under duress." "And what would it mean for Harry, practically speaking?" Arthur pressed. "Magically, he would become part Weasley," Dumbledore explained. "Not replacing his Potter heritage, but adding to it. He would likely develop some Weasley family traits, magical affinities, perhaps minor physical characteristics. The protective magic of your family line would extend to include him, and his mother's protection might, I emphasize might, transfer partially to this new blood connection." "And legally?" Molly asked. "He would become, in effect, your child, both legally and magically. Not adopted in the conventional sense, but bound by deeper magic. The Ministry would recognize this bond as superseding any previous guardianship arrangements." The implications hung heavy in the air. This was no longer a temporary fostering or even a conventional adoption. This was ancient magic, binding and permanent. "We'll need time to consider this," Arthur said finally. "And to explain it to Harry properly." "Of course," Dumbledore agreed. "It's not a decision to be made lightly. In the meantime, I've taken the liberty of reinforcing the standard protective wards around the Burrow. They won't match the power of blood protection, but they should provide reasonable security for the immediate future." "Thank you, Albus," Molly said, her tone softening slightly. "Despite our disagreements about Harry's past care, we appreciate your concern for his safety." Dumbledore inclined his head in acknowledgement. "Harry's welfare has always been my primary concern, Molly. I regret that my focus on the magical threats to his life blinded me to the more mundane dangers he faced." A rather significant oversight, Arthur noted, not unkindly but firmly. Indeed, Dumbledore agreed solemnly. One I hope to help rectify moving forward. The conversation shifted to more immediate practical matters: Harry's health regimen, the upcoming school year, arrangements for purchasing his supplies. Throughout the discussion, the option of blood adoption remained an unspoken presence, a possibility too momentous to be decided quickly but too important to be dismissed. By the time Dumbledore departed, promising to return with more detailed information about the ritual, both Molly and Arthur were emotionally exhausted but resolute in their commitment to Harry's welfare. Whatever form it ultimately took, they had silently agreed that Harry would not return to the Dursleys, not even for the powerful protection Lily's sacrifice had provided. Some prices, they had decided, were simply too high to pay. Harry woke to the sound of Ron rummaging through his trunk, apparently searching for something with his usual lack of organizational skill. "What are you looking for?" Harry asked groggily, reaching for his glasses. Ron started, not having realized Harry was awake. "Sorry, mate. Did I wake you?" "Just looking for my Chudley Cannon's book. Thought I'd show you their new Seeker's moves." Harry sat up, surprised to find he felt remarkably refreshed after his nap. "What time is it?" "Nearly dinner," Ron replied, finally extracting a dog-eared book from the depths of his trunk. "You've been asleep for ages." "Ages? But I only meant to rest for an hour." Ron shrugged. "Mum said to let you sleep. Something about your body needing it for healing." Harry frowned, not entirely comfortable with the idea of requiring special treatment, but recognizing the truth in it. He did feel better for the extended rest. "Did Dumbledore leave already?" he asked, swinging his legs over the side of the bed. "Yeah, about an hour ago. He and Mum and Dad had a long talk. Fred and George tried to listen in with their extendable ears, but Mum caught them." "What did they talk about? Did you hear anything?" Ron hesitated, looking uncharacteristically serious. "Just bits. Something about protection and blood wards and adoption, I think." "Adoption?" Harry repeated, startled. "Like your parents adopting me?" "Dunno the details," Ron admitted. "But yeah, something like that. Sounded complicated though, not regular adoption, but some special magical kind." Harry's mind raced with the implications. Magical adoption. Becoming officially part of the Weasley family. The thought was simultaneously thrilling and terrifying. "Would that? I mean, would you be okay with that?" he asked hesitantly, unable to look directly at Ron. "Having me officially as part of your family?" Ron stared at him as though he'd suggested the Chudley Cannons might win the league. "Are you mental?" "Of course I would. You're practically family already." The simple certainty in Ron's voice dispelled some of Harry's anxiety. "But there are already so many of you. And I'd be another mouth to feed, another expense." "Harry," Ron interrupted, looking uncomfortable but determined, "I know we don't have much money. But that doesn't mean we can't have you. Mum and Dad wouldn't offer if they couldn't manage. And anyway, I know you've got some gold in Gringotts. Not that that matters," he added hastily, "but you wouldn't be a burden or whatever it is you're thinking." Harry felt a rush of gratitude toward his friend. Ron, for all his occasional tactlessness, understood him better than most. "Thanks," he said simply. I've never had a proper family before. I'm not sure I know how it works." Ron snorted. "There's no instruction manual, mate. You just are. You argue sometimes, you help each other out, you get annoyed when Percy goes on about cauldron bottoms, but when it matters, you stick together." "That sounds nice," Harry admitted quietly. "It is," Ron agreed. "Most of the time. Now come on, let's go see if dinner's ready. I'm starving." As they headed downstairs, Harry found himself contemplating this potential new reality. Becoming a Weasley, officially, magically, permanently. No more Dursleys, no more cupboard, no more feeling like an unwanted burden. Instead, a proper home with people who actually wanted him around. It seemed almost too good to be true, which made Harry instinctively wary. In his experience, things that seemed too good to be true usually were. There had to be complications, conditions, sacrifices required. That was how the world worked. His suspicions were confirmed when he entered the kitchen to find Molly and Arthur waiting with unusually serious expressions. "Harry, dear," Molly greeted him warmly despite her evident concern. "Feeling better after your rest?" "Much better, thank you," Harry replied politely, taking a seat at the table. "Ron mentioned Dumbledore was here?" Arthur and Molly exchanged glances. "Yes, he was," Arthur confirmed. "We had a long discussion about your situation and the options moving forward. Including, adoption." Harry ventured, watching their reactions carefully. "Ah, I see the children have been eavesdropping again," Molly said, though without her usual heat. "Yes, Harry, adoption was one of the possibilities discussed. But it's rather more complicated than ordinary adoption. Blood adoption," Arthur clarified. "An ancient form of magical kinship that would make you, in essence, partly a Weasley by blood as well as by law." Harry tried to process this. "So I'd stop being a Potter?" No, Molly assured him quickly. "You would always be James and Lily's son. This magic adds to your heritage rather than replacing it. You'd be both Potter and Weasley." "Why is this necessary?" Harry asked, his instinctive wariness surfacing. "Why not just regular adoption?" Arthur leaned forward, his expression earnest. "It relates to the protection your mother left you. The blood protection that Dumbledore established at your aunt's house. A blood adoption might allow some portion of that protection to transfer to a new blood connection, to us. So I'd still be protected from Voldemort," Harry said slowly, understanding dawning. "Potentially, yes," Arthur nodded. Though Dumbledore was clear that it would likely not be as powerful as the original protection. But combined with other magical defenses, it should provide reasonable security. Harry frowned, considering this. "And what would it mean, for me? Would I change?" "Not fundamentally," Molly assured him. "You'd still be you, Harry. But magic this deep can have effects. You might develop some Weasley traits, magical affinities, perhaps even minor physical characteristics." "Like what?" "Red hair?" Harry asked, half joking. "Possibly, though more likely subtle changes," Arthur explained. "Perhaps a hint of red highlights, or freckles. More significant would be the magical resonances. Weasleys tend towards certain magical strengths and weaknesses that might influence your own abilities." Harry absorbed this, trying to imagine himself with Weasley traits. The idea wasn't unpleasant, rather the opposite, in fact. To carry visible proof of belonging to this family seemed almost right. "And what's involved in this ritual? Is it dangerous?" "Not dangerous, but demanding," Arthur clarified. "It requires genuine willingness from all participants. It cannot be coerced or performed under duress. The ritual itself involves the literal mingling of blood, a few drops from each family member, combined with powerful binding spells." "Each family member?" Harry repeated. "You mean, all of you?" "Those who choose to participate," Molly explained gently. "No one would be forced, Harry. But blood adoption works best when the entire family embraces the new member." The implication that any of the Weasleys might choose not to participate sent a momentary pang through Harry's chest. "And if someone doesn't want to? Then they won't participate," Arthur said simply. "But Harry, I don't think you need worry about that. Our children care for you deeply." Harry nodded, though the worry lingered. "And what about legal stuff? Would this affect the investigations into the Dursleys?" "No, those would proceed regardless," Molly assured him. "This is about your future, not their past actions." "When would this happen?" "If I agree, I mean." Not immediately, Arthur explained. The ritual requires preparation, and the ministry would need to approve it, though with Amelia Bones advocating for your case, Dumbledore believes that shouldn't be difficult. Realistically, it would be several weeks at minimum. Harry nodded, feeling simultaneously overwhelmed and oddly calm. The decision before him was monumental, to magically bind himself to the Weasley family, to become part of them in blood as well as affection. And yet, it didn't feel like a difficult choice at all. "I'd like to do it," he said simply. "If you're sure, if everyone's sure." Molly's eyes filled with tears. "Oh, Harry. We're absolutely sure. We've wanted you as part of our family since the moment Ron first wrote home about you. But," Arthur added gently, "we think you should take some time to consider this carefully. It's a significant decision, not to be rushed into, no matter how right it feels." Harry wanted to argue that no time was needed, that he'd known the Weasleys were more family to him than the Dursleys had ever been from the first moment he'd stepped into the burrow. But he recognized the wisdom in Arthur's caution. "All right," he agreed. "I'll think about it. But I already know what my answer will be." Molly smiled through her tears. "We do too, dear. But all the same, let's give it proper consideration. Now," she continued, visibly shifting to a more practical demeanor, "dinner is nearly ready, and you need to take your evening potions." As the conversation turned to more immediate concerns, Harry found himself observing the Weasleys with new eyes. These people, this wonderful, chaotic, loving family, might soon be his family not just in his heart but in his blood. The thought filled him with a warmth that no potion could match. For the first time since leaving Hogwarts, Harry felt something he had almost forgotten: hope. Not just for the summer, not just for temporary relief, but for a permanent place of belonging. A home. Later that night, as the burrows settled into sleep, Harry lay awake in Ron's room, listening to his friend's gentle snores. His mind raced with the day's revelations and possibilities. Blood adoption. Becoming a Weasley. Having a real family. Part of him still couldn't quite believe it was possible. After years with the Dursleys, being treated as an unwanted burden, the idea that anyone would willingly bind themselves to him, magically, permanently, seemed almost inconceivable. And yet, the Weasleys had offered just that. Not out of obligation or pity, but out of genuine care. They wanted him, Harry Potter, not the boy who lived. They had seen him at his most vulnerable, underfed, mistreated, damaged, and still wanted to make him their own. A soft knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. He sat up, reaching for his glasses as the door creaked open to reveal Ginny's small figure silhouetted against the hallway light. "Harry," she whispered. "Are you awake?" "Yeah," he replied quietly, surprised by her appearance. Ginny had barely spoken 2 words to him since his arrival. "Is everything okay?" She hesitated, then slipped into the room, carefully closing the door behind her. In the moonlight filtering through the window, Harry could see she was clutching something to her chest. "I heard Mum and Dad talking," she said, her voice barely audible. "About the blood adoption." "Oh," Harry said, uncertain how to respond. "Yeah, they told me about it too." Ginny moved closer, perching tentatively on the edge of his bed. "I wanted to give you something. If you decide to become part of our family." She held out the object she'd been holding, a small, handmade book bound in faded blue fabric. "It's a Weasley family grimoire. Well, a copy of part of it. The parts about being a Weasley." Harry took it carefully, feeling the weight of significance beyond the physical lightness of the book. "A grimoire. Most old wizarding families have them," Ginny explained, her shyness seemingly forgotten in the importance of her mission. "Books of family magic, traditions, history. Percy made this copy for me when I was little and scared about going to Hogwarts. It helped me understand what being a Weasley means." Harry opened the book carefully. By the moonlight, he could make out handwritten pages covered in Percy's neat script, interspersed with what appeared to be family trees, spell diagrams, and small sketches. "This is, thank you, Ginny," he said, genuinely touched. "But shouldn't I wait until after the adoption? If it happens, I mean." Ginny shook her head firmly. "That's why I'm giving it to you now. So you can understand what you'd be becoming part of. What it means to be a Weasley, the good and the bad." "The bad?" She smiled faintly. "We're not perfect, Harry. Weasleys have a temper. We're stubborn. Sometimes too proud despite not having much to be proud of, according to some people. And there's a reason our hair is red." "What's that?" Harry asked, intrigued. "Old magic," Ginny whispered, a note of pride in her voice. "From before Hogwarts was built. The grimoire says Weasleys have always had a gift for protective magic, shields, wards, defensive charms. The red hair is a mark of it. Magic of the hearth and home." Harry stared at her, fascinated by this glimpse into wizarding family heritage, something he had never experienced with his own family. "That's brilliant," he said sincerely. "I never knew." "Most people don't," Ginny admitted. "They just see us as poor and with too many children. But being a Weasley means more than that. It means loyalty and courage and, well, you'll see. It's all in there." She gestured to the book. "I'll read every word," Harry promised, carefully placing the grimoire on his bedside table. "Thank you, Ginny. This means a lot." She nodded, suddenly seeming to remember her usual shyness around him. "Well, good night then." "Good night," Harry replied, watching as she slipped back out of the room as quietly as she had entered. Alone again, Harry picked up the grimoire, running his fingers over the worn fabric cover. A book of Weasley family magic and history. A guide to the heritage he might soon share. For the first time, Harry allowed himself to truly imagine it, being a Weasley. Having brothers and a sister. Being part of something larger than himself, something with history and traditions and shared magic. Having red in his hair and Weasley magic in his blood. With the grimoire clutched to his chest, Harry finally drifted towards sleep, his dreams filled not with cupboards and locks and hunger, but with flaming red hair and magical protection and the warmth of belonging. Somewhere in the burrow's ancient walls, magic stirred in recognition, preparing to welcome a new son into a family bound by more than mere blood, bound by love, by choice, and by the oldest magic of all. In the dim light of his office at Hogwarts, Albus Dumbledore sat contemplating the series of events that had so dramatically altered his carefully laid plans. The silver instruments that had once monitored the blood wards at Privet Drive now sat silent, their purpose rendered moot by Harry's removal from his relative's care. On his desk lay an ancient tome, open to a page describing the ritual of blood adoption, its requirements, its effects, its binding power. Beside it, a letter from Amelia Bones outlined the preliminary findings of the investigation into the Dursleys' treatment of Harry, each dispassionate line of official documentation a damning indictment of his own failure to ensure the boy's welfare. "I was blind, Fawkes," he murmured to his Phoenix companion, who watched him with intelligent eyes from his golden perch. "So focused on the threat of Voldemort that I overlooked the immediate dangers. A strategic error of the highest order." Fawkes trilled softly, a sound that carried both comfort and gentle rebuke. Yes, I know," Dumbledore sighed. "More than a strategic error, a moral failure. I left a child in harm's way, justified by the greater good." He removed his spectacles, rubbing the bridge of his nose wearily. The revelations of Harry's treatment had shaken him more deeply than he cared to admit. As a teacher, as a leader sworn to protect the young, the evidence of suffering he had inadvertently enabled cut to the core of his self-conception. The blood adoption may work, he continued his one-sided conversation with the Phoenix. Not as powerfully as Lily's protection, but perhaps sufficiently when combined with other measures. And Harry would have a proper family at last, something I should have prioritized from the beginning. Fawkes let out another musical note, this one distinctly affirmative. "Indeed," Dumbledore agreed with a small smile. The Weasleys are exactly what he needs. They've already given him what the Dursleys never did: acceptance, affection, a sense of belonging. Adding blood ties will only strengthen that bond. He rose, moving to the window that overlooked the silent summer grounds of Hogwarts. The school year would begin again in just over a month, bringing Harry back to these halls, not as the isolated, vulnerable boy who had first arrived, but as a child with a proper family behind him. A child who knew he was wanted, who understood his own worth. Perhaps, Dumbledore mused, this apparent setback is actually the correction we needed. Harry deserves love, Fawkes. In my concern for his physical survival, I neglected his heart. Molly and Arthur will not make that mistake. The Phoenix sang a longer phrase, its magical notes filling the office with warmth and something like hope. Yes, Dumbledore agreed, a genuine smile breaking through his weariness. Yes, I believe you're right. Out of this mistake may come something better than my original plan. Harry will still need guidance, still need protection from what lies ahead, but he will face it with the strength that comes from knowing one is truly loved. With that comforting thought, Dumbledore returned to his desk, drawing a fresh sheet of parchment toward him. There was much to do, arrangements to make, authorities to persuade, protective measures to research. The path ahead had changed, but the destination remained the same, to ensure Harry Potter survived to fulfill his destiny. Only now, Dumbledore acknowledged with newly humbled wisdom, that survival must include not just Harry's life, but his happiness. The boy deserved nothing less. Chapter 3, The New Path Forward. The days at the Burrow fell into a comfortable rhythm for Harry. Mornings began with nutritional potions and a hearty breakfast that his gradually healing body was learning to accept. Afternoons were spent deganoming the garden with Ron and the twins, exploring the nearby orchard, or occasionally visiting the small pond for swimming, an activity Harry had never properly learned but was eagerly attempting under the twins' somewhat questionable tutelage. Evenings were for games of exploding snap or wizard chess in the cozy living room, surrounded by the warm chaos that defined the Weasley household. Throughout it all, Harry felt himself slowly transforming, not just physically as Healer Abernathy's regimen took effect, but emotionally as well, as he cautiously embraced the novel concept of being genuinely wanted. 2 weeks after his rescue from Privet Drive, Harry sat at the kitchen table with Arthur, reviewing the latest correspondence regarding his situation. The parchment before them bore the official seal of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. So they've officially charged the Dursleys? Harry asked, mixed emotions churning inside him as he processed the neat legal language. Arthur nodded gravely. In both worlds. The Muggle authorities have filed charges of child neglect and abuse based on Ms. Thornton's investigation. The magical charges are more complex: endangerment of a magical minor, obstruction of magical education, and violation of the guardianship oath Petunia implicitly accepted when she took you in. Harry frowned. I didn't know there was an oath. It was embedded in the magical contract created when she accepted you into her home, Arthur explained. Dumbledore included it in the letter he left, a basic magical obligation to provide reasonable care. Not much by wizarding standards, but enough that her deliberate neglect constitutes a violation. What will happen to them? Harry asked, not entirely sure how he felt about the proceedings. Part of him still flinched at the idea of causing trouble, while another part, a growing part, recognized that actions should have consequences. The Muggle consequences will likely include probation, mandatory counseling, and regular inspections by child welfare services, Arthur said. They'll retain custody of Dudley, but under close supervision. The magical penalties are primarily financial, restitution to be paid into a trust for your benefit. I don't want their money, Harry said immediately. Arthur smiled gently. It's not about the money, Harry. It's about accountability. And the funds won't go directly to you, they'll be managed by Gringotts until you're of age, earmarked specifically for educational and health expenses related to undoing the damage of your time with them. Harry considered this, finding the arrangement more acceptable than a simple transfer of gold. And will I ever have to see them again? No, Arthur assured him firmly. The official ruling terminates their guardianship completely. You never have to return to Privet Drive. Relief washed over Harry, so profound that he felt momentarily lightheaded. It's really over then. That chapter is closed, Arthur confirmed, squeezing Harry's shoulder. Now we focus on writing a new one. The reference to new beginnings brought Harry's thoughts immediately to the blood adoption, a topic that had been discussed extensively but not yet finalized in the 2 weeks since it was first proposed. Has there been any word from the ministry about the adoption application? Arthur's expression brightened. Actually, yes. That's the second piece of news I wanted to share. Amelia Bones has pushed the approval through the final committee. We've been granted permission to perform the ritual on the 1st of August. The day after my birthday, Harry noted, a smile spreading across his face despite his attempt to remain casual. Indeed, Arthur nodded, his eyes twinkling knowingly. Quite a significant few days you have coming up. Harry had been trying very hard to pretend he hadn't noticed the poorly concealed preparations for what was evidently going to be his first proper birthday celebration. Molly's whispered conversations that abruptly ceased when he entered the kitchen, the mysterious packages being hidden away, Fred and George's unsubtle questioning about his favorite desserts, all pointed to something being planned for July 31st. I've never really celebrated my birthday before, Harry admitted quietly. The Dursleys usually ignored it. Last year Hagrid brought me my first ever cake. Arthur's expression flickered with that now familiar combination of sadness and controlled anger that appeared whenever new details of Harry's life with the Dursleys emerged. Well, Molly has been planning this for days, so prepare yourself for a proper Weasley celebration. Nothing fancy by some standards, but what we lack in galleons we make up for in enthusiasm. Harry grinned. That sounds perfect. A comfortable silence fell between them as Harry contemplated the upcoming events. His birthday, followed immediately by the blood adoption ritual that would officially make him part of the Weasley family. It seemed almost too good to be true, the kind of happy ending that happened in stories, not in his actual life. Mr. Weasley, he began hesitantly, are you sure about this? The adoption, I mean. It's a big commitment, and I know I come with complications. Arthur studied him for a long moment, his expression thoughtful. Harry, do you know what my boggart would be? The question caught Harry off guard. No, sir. Something happening to my family, Arthur said simply. Not poverty, not professional failure, not even you-know-who himself. Just harm coming to those I love. He leaned forward, his gaze intensely focused. When we found out how the Dursleys were treating you, that boggart began to include you. Not because of your fame or your connection to Dumbledore or any external factor. Because somewhere along the way, without any blood ritual or official declaration, you became part of what I consider my family. Harry swallowed hard against the sudden tightness in his throat. The blood adoption doesn't create our connection to you, Harry, Arthur continued gently. It merely formalizes what's already in our hearts. And yes, we understand the complications, the potential danger, the public scrutiny, the responsibilities. We've considered it all, and our answer remains the same, we want you as our son. Harry blinked rapidly, struggling to maintain his composure. Thank you, he managed finally, the words entirely inadequate for the emotions surging through him. Arthur smiled, tactfully changing the subject to give Harry a moment to collect himself. Now, we should discuss the ritual itself. Dumbledore will be performing it, with Bill assisting, he's taking emergency leave from Gringotts to be here. Bill's coming home? Harry asked, grateful for the shift to practical matters. Arriving tomorrow, Arthur confirmed. He's quite adept at ritual magic from his work as a cursebreaker. Charlie won't be able to make it from Romania in time, unfortunately, but he's sent his magical consent, which can be incorporated into the ritual. How exactly does it work? Harry had been reading the grimoire Ginny had given him, absorbing the history and traditions of the Weasley family, but details about the actual adoption ritual were sparse. It's relatively straightforward, though magically complex, Arthur explained. Each participating family member contributes a few drops of blood to a ceremonial bowl. You do the same. The blood is mixed with specific potions and activated with incantations that create the familial bond. The magic recognizes intention and affection, so the strength of the connection depends partly on the genuine feelings behind it. Will it hurt? Harry asked, not particularly concerned for himself but wondering about the younger Weasleys. Just a small prick for the blood, Arthur assured him. The magical merging afterward can feel intense, a warm rush as the familial magic recognizes and incorporates you. Nothing painful, but quite powerful. Harry nodded, relieved. And afterward, I'll be a Weasley. Officially. Potter Weasley, technically, Arthur corrected with a smile. We wouldn't dream of erasing your parents' legacy. You'll carry both bloodlines, both heritages, both magical signatures. The hyphenated name struck Harry as perfect, honoring his parents while embracing his new family. Potter Weasley, he repeated, testing the sound of it. Harry James Potter Weasley. Has a nice ring to it, Arthur agreed warmly. Now, Molly's probably wondering where we've disappeared to. Shall we join the others for lunch? As they rose to leave the makeshift study, Harry impulsively reached out and hugged Arthur, a quick, awkward gesture that nonetheless conveyed his overwhelming gratitude. Arthur returned the embrace without hesitation, one hand gently ruffling Harry's perpetually messy hair. Everything's going to be all right now, son, he said softly. You're home. The day before Harry's birthday brought a flurry of activity to the burrow. Bill Weasley arrived mid-morning, his long hair tied back and a dragon fawn earring dangling prominently, much to Molly's evident disapproval and the younger Weasley's admiration. So you're the famous Harry Potter, Bill said with a warm grin, shaking Harry's hand firmly. Heard a lot about you from this lot. Saved Ron from a troll, I understand. It was actually the other way around, Harry replied, immediately liking Ron's oldest brother. Ron knocked it out. Always knew those chess strategies would come in handy for something, Bill laughed, clapping Ron on the shoulder proudly. The arrival of the eldest Weasley son shifted the household dynamic subtly. Percy seemed to stand a little straighter, clearly eager to impress his successful older brother, while Fred and George immediately began plotting ways to incorporate Bill into their latest pranking schemes. Even Ginny emerged from her typical shyness around Harry, animated by her evident admiration for Bill. After lunch, Bill took Harry aside for what he called a pre-adoption assessment. Nothing to worry about, he assured Harry as they settled in Percy's immaculately tidy room, which had become the default location for anything requiring privacy. Just need to check how your magical signature might interact with the Weasley family magic. Cursebreaker training comes in handy for this sort of thing. Will there be problems because of my mother's protection? Harry asked, having wondered about this since learning of the planned adoption. Bill's expression turned thoughtful as he withdrew his wand. That's exactly what we need to determine. From what Dad and Dumbledore have explained, your mother's sacrifice created a unique magical protection in your blood. The question is how that will interact with our family's magical traits. Ginny gave me a book about Weasley family magic, Harry mentioned. Something about protective enchantments. The grimoire. She showed you that? Bill seemed pleasantly surprised. Ginny must really trust you. Yes, our family has an affinity for protective magic, shields, wards, defensive charms. It's why Dad's so good at his job, even though the ministry doesn't recognize it properly. Weasleys have been warders and protectors for generations, long before the ministry existed. And the red hair? Harry asked, recalling Ginny's explanation. Bill grinned, running a hand through his own flame-colored ponytail. The mark of the magic, so they say. Old families often have physical traits tied to their magical affinities. The Blacks have those distinctive gray eyes, Malfoy's that white blonde hair. We got the red. So if the adoption works, I might get red hair. Harry asked, trying to imagine himself with the distinctive Weasley coloring. Probably not entirely red, Bill clarified, beginning to move his wand in intricate patterns around Harry's head. Blood adoptions usually result in a blending. Maybe red highlights, or a reddish tint in certain lights. It varies depending on the strength of the original traits and how they interact magically. Harry watched, fascinated, as Bill conducted a series of magical tests, conjuring colorful auras around Harry's body, casting diagnostic spells that created complex patterns in the air, and at one point having Harry hold a crystal that changed colors rapidly as it responded to his magical signature. "Remarkable," Bill murmured after nearly an hour of assessment. "Your mother's protection is still clearly present, but it's not incompatible with our family magic at all. In fact, they seem potentially complementary, her sacrificial protection and our defensive affinity. The adoption should enhance both, rather than conflicting." "That's good, right?" Harry asked, relieved. "Very good," Bill confirmed, making final notes on a piece of parchment. "I was worried we might need to modify the ritual to accommodate the existing protection, but it looks like the standard form will work perfectly. Your mother's magic seems almost eager to connect with additional protective forces. As though it wants to be strengthened." The idea that his mother's final gift to him might actually be enhanced by the adoption was deeply comforting to Harry. It felt like approval from beyond, as though Lily Potter herself was blessing this new connection. "Will I still be protected from Voldemort?" he asked, using the name deliberately to gauge Bill's reaction. To his credit, Bill didn't flinch, merely nodding thoughtfully. The specific protection against his touch should remain intact, and possibly even strengthen once it's intertwined with Weasley defensive magic. "You'll essentially have layered protections, your mother's sacrifice specifically targeting you-know-who, and our family magic providing broader defensive capabilities. Better than being stuck at the Dursleys," Harry observed. "Infinitely better," Bill agreed firmly. "And not just magically. Family is its own kind of protection, Harry. Having people who genuinely care about you, who'll stand beside you no matter what, that's powerful in ways that go beyond spells and rituals." Harry nodded, understanding this truth more deeply with each day he spent at the Burrow. The knowledge that the Weasleys had fought for him, had challenged Dumbledore himself to protect him, had altered their lives to include him, that was a kind of security he'd never known before. "Now," Bill said, standing and stretching, "I believe I'm under strict orders to deliver you to the twins for an urgent game of Quidditch before dinner. Apparently they need to assess your seeking abilities for some mysterious reason that definitely has nothing to do with birthday surprises." Harry grinned, seeing through the transparent excuse but perfectly happy to play along. "Better not keep them waiting then." As they headed downstairs, Harry found himself studying Bill's movements, his mannerisms, the way he interacted with his siblings, wondering which Weasley traits he might absorb through the coming ritual. The thought of carrying some essence of this family within him, of their magic becoming part of his own, felt right in a way he couldn't fully articulate. For so long, his only connection to family had been his appearance, his father's unruly hair, his mother's green eyes. Now he would have something more, a living, breathing family whose magic and blood and love would become part of his very being. Not replacing James and Lily Potter, but adding to their legacy, expanding the foundation they had given him with their sacrifice. By this time tomorrow, he would be 13 years old. And the day after that, he would become a Weasley in more than just his heart. The thought carried him through the afternoon Quidditch match with a lightness that had nothing to do with his Nimbus 2000 and everything to do with finally having something real to celebrate. Harry woke on the morning of July 31st to the sound of Ron's exaggeratedly loud, stretching noises, clearly designed to wake him while maintaining the pretense that it was accidental. "Oh, you're up!" Ron exclaimed with obviously feigned surprise when Harry opened his eyes. "Didn't mean to wake you. No reason to come downstairs right away or anything. Nothing special happening today." "Subtle, Ron," Harry commented dryly, reaching for his glasses. "Very convincing." Ron grinned, abandoning the charade. "Happy birthday, mate. 13, officially a teenager now." "Thanks," Harry replied, sitting up and running a hand through his perpetually messy hair. Though I'm not sure being a teenager is much to celebrate, based on what your mum says about Fred and George. Well, you'd better get dressed anyway, Ron advised, already heading for the door. No rush, of course. Take your time. Maybe 10 minutes. But definitely not any sooner than 5 minutes. With that deeply suspicious instruction, he disappeared downstairs. Harry shook his head, amused by the Weasleys' utterly transparent attempts at surprise. He deliberately took exactly 7 minutes to dress and make his way downstairs, pausing at the kitchen doorway to prepare himself for whatever awaited. "Happy birthday, Harry." The chorus of voices greeted him the moment he appeared, accompanied by a small explosion of magical confetti from what appeared to be one of the twins' inventions. The kitchen had been transformed overnight. A banner spanning the entire length of the room proclaimed, "Happy 13th birthday Harry," in color-changing letters that occasionally rearranged themselves to spell out different birthday messages. Balloons bobbed against the ceiling, some emitting musical notes when they bumped together, creating an ongoing randomized melody. The table was laden with breakfast foods, all of Harry's favorites that he'd mentioned over the past weeks, and in the center stood a magnificent cake in the shape of a golden snitch, its wings crafted from delicate sugar work that actually fluttered slightly. "This is, wow," Harry managed, genuinely overwhelmed by the display. "You didn't think we'd let your birthday pass without a proper celebration, did you?" Molly beamed, coming forward to envelop him in a warm hug. 13 is a special age for a wizard. The transition to adolescence, Percy intoned seriously. Traditionally a significant magical milestone. "What Percy means," Fred interjected, "is that now you're officially allowed to be moody and unreasonable, and everyone has to blame it on your age." "It's in the rules," George confirmed solemnly. "We've been taking full advantage for years." Arthur stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on Harry's shoulder. "Happy birthday, son. Come, sit down, breakfast first, then presents." "Presents?" Harry repeated, still trying to process the scene before him. "You didn't have to, of course we did," Bill interrupted from his place at the table. "It's your birthday. That's how it works." Harry allowed himself to be guided to the head of the table, where a special chair had been decorated with ribbons and what appeared to be hand-drawn snitches and broomsticks, Ginny's artistic contribution, he suspected, noting her pleased but embarrassed expression. The breakfast that followed was unlike any meal Harry had ever experienced. The food was magnificent, Molly had outdone herself with all his favorites, but it was the atmosphere that truly made it special. The Weasleys regaled him with family birthday traditions, sharing stories of memorable celebrations from years past. "Remember Bill's 11th birthday when Dad enchanted the garden gnomes to sing?" George recalled, laughing. "A spectacular magical failure," Arthur admitted good-naturedly. "They knew only one song, a rather rude tavern ballad I'd heard at the ministry, and couldn't be silenced for 3 days. Mum was furious," Ron added gleefully. "I was not furious," Molly corrected primly. "I was appropriately concerned about the educational content being exposed to my children." "You turned Dad's hair green," Bill reminded her with a grin. A measured response, Molly maintained, though her lips twitched suspiciously. Harry absorbed these stories eagerly, constructing a mental image of Weasley family life through the years, the celebrations, the mishaps, the love evident even in their moments of conflict. Tomorrow, he would become part of these traditions, woven into the tapestry of their shared history. When breakfast concluded, Molly cleared the dishes with a wave of her wand, and Arthur summoned a small pile of wrapped packages that had been hidden elsewhere in the house. "Presents," Ginny announced excitedly, her usual shyness forgotten in the festive atmosphere. "You really didn't need to," Harry began again, but was immediately shushed by multiple Weasleys. "Stop saying that," Ron advised. "It's your birthday. Presents are mandatory." The gifts were placed before him, not an overwhelming number, but more than Harry had ever received at one time. He reached for the first somewhat hesitantly, still uncomfortable being the center of attention. From Ron, he received a book on the Chudley Cannons, So You Can Finally Appreciate a Proper Team, from the twins, a mysterious box labeled, Beginner's Prankster Kit, that Molly eyed with deep suspicion, from Percy, a surprisingly thoughtful enchanted bookmark that would automatically find where he had left off reading. Ginny's gift was a hand-drawn card that transformed into a miniature Quidditch pitch when opened, with tiny enchanted figures that flew around playing a perpetual match. "I charmed it myself," she admitted shyly when Harry expressed his amazement. Bill helped with the more complex animations. Bill presented him with a small leather pouch on a cord. "Egyptian protection amulet," he explained. "Coordinates well with the family protective magic you'll be receiving tomorrow." From Molly and Arthur came the most unexpected gift of all, a small wooden box containing a magical watch with multiple hands, similar to the Weasley family clock. "It's tradition to give a watch when a wizard comes of age at 17, Arthur explained. "But we wanted you to have this now. It's connected to our family clock, the hands show where each of us is at any time." Harry opened the watch with trembling fingers. The face displayed tiny labeled hands for each Weasley, currently all pointing to home except for Charlie's, which indicated work. And there, among them, was a hand labeled Harry, indistinguishable from the others. "It's already been updated to recognize you as family," Molly said softly. "The magic knows, even before the ritual." Harry stared at the watch, unable to find words adequate to express what the gift meant to him. To be included on the Weasley clock, to have this tangible proof of belonging, it was beyond anything he could have imagined. "Thank you," he managed finally, his voice thick with emotion. "All of you. This is the best birthday I've ever had. And it's not over yet," Fred announced, breaking the emotional moment with perfect timing. "Wait until you see what we've planned for this afternoon." The day that followed lived up to this promise. The twins had organized an elaborate Quidditch tournament in the orchard, with teams drawn by lot and positions regularly rotated so everyone played in different roles. Even Percy was persuaded to participate, revealing a surprisingly decent ability as keeper that he'd apparently been hiding from his siblings for years. Lunch was a picnic by the pond, featuring all of Harry's favorite foods and culminating in the spectacular snitch cake, which hovered briefly before allowing itself to be cut. The afternoon brought a scavenger hunt throughout the burrow and its grounds, with clues that tested magical knowledge and resulted in the discovery of additional small gifts and treats hidden around the property. As evening approached, Arthur set up an enchanted bonfire in the garden that burned in different colors and occasionally released harmless magical sparks in the shapes of various magical creatures. They roasted marshmallows and sausages on special extending sticks that automatically rotated for even cooking, while Bill entertained them with stories of his adventures breaking curses in Egypt. Looking around at the Weasleys gathered in the flickering light of the magical fire, Harry felt a contentment so complete it was almost painful. Tomorrow would bring the ritual that would make him officially part of this family, but in all the ways that truly mattered, he already belonged. As though reading his thoughts, Molly settled beside him on the garden bench, wrapping a warm arm around his shoulders. "Happy birthday, dear," she said softly. "I hope it's been everything you wanted." "It's been perfect," Harry replied honestly. "I never thought I'd have something like this." "Well, get used to it," she advised with a gentle squeeze. "Because there will be many more birthdays just like this one, surrounded by family who love you." Family who love you. The words resonated within Harry like a promise, a certainty he'd never dared to hope for. As the magical fire cast its colorful light over the gathered Weasleys, soon to be his family in blood as well as heart, Harry silently thanked whatever fate or fortune had brought him to this moment. For the first time in his memory, Harry Potter fell asleep on his birthday with a heart full of joy and a mind free from worry about what the next day would bring. Tomorrow couldn't come quickly enough. The morning of the blood adoption dawned clear and bright, as though nature itself approved of the day's significance. Harry woke early, too nervous and excited to sleep late, and found the rest of the household similarly stirring before their usual time. Breakfast was a quieter affair than the previous day's birthday celebration, with an undercurrent of solemn anticipation running beneath the normal Weasley morning chaos. Molly kept finding excuses to touch Harry, straightening his collar, brushing his hair from his forehead, squeezing his shoulder as she passed, as though reassuring herself that he was really there, really about to become her son in magic and blood. The ritual will take place at noon, Arthur explained as they ate. Dumbledore will arrive an hour before to help with the final preparations. The timing is deliberate. Magical adoptions are traditionally performed when the sun is at its zenith, symbolizing the clarity and permanence of the new bond. Should I do anything to prepare? Harry asked, pushing his eggs around his plate, too nervous to eat much. Just be yourself, Bill advised from across the table. The ritual responds to genuine emotion and intention. Trying to force specific feelings would actually interfere with the magic. What about us? Ginny asked. Do we need to do anything special? Just focus on how you think of Harry, Bill explained. Your natural feelings as a sister welcoming a new brother. The magic will read that intention and form the appropriate bonds. Sister. Brother. The word sent a small thrill through Harry. After tomorrow, those terms would be magically, legally accurate. Ginny would be his sister, Ron his brother, Molly and Arthur his parents, not replacing the ones he had lost, but adding to his sense of family in a way he'd never thought possible. As breakfast concluded, the household dispersed to prepare for the ceremony. The ritual would take place in the garden, which Arthur, Bill, and Percy were transforming according to ancient magical specifications, creating a perfect circle marked with runic symbols, setting up a ceremonial altar at its center, positioning candles at precise cardinal points. Harry watched from the kitchen window, oddly calmed by the methodical preparations. This was old magic, family magic, with roots stretching back centuries. There was comfort in its ancient formality, in the knowledge that countless magical families had performed similar rituals throughout history. Nervous? A voice asked behind him. Harry turned to find Fred and George, for once without their typical mischievous expressions. A bit, Harry admitted. It's a big change. Not really, Fred countered thoughtfully. Just making official what already exists. You've been our brother in all but blood since Ron wrote home about you sharing your sweets on the train first year, George added. This is just catching the magic up with reality. Harry smiled, touched by the twins' uncharacteristically serious sentiment. Thanks. I'm glad you both agreed to participate. Wouldn't miss it, Fred assured him. Though fair warning, once you're officially a Weasley, George continued. You're a legitimate prank target. They finished together. I'll consider myself warned, Harry laughed, feeling some of his tension ease. Leave it to the twins to find the perfect way to normalize even something as momentous as a blood adoption. At 11 o'clock, Dumbledore arrived through the flue, dressed in formal robes of deep purple embroidered with silver stars that actually twinkled like the night sky. He carried an ancient-looking wooden box and was accompanied by Amelia Bones, whose presence was required to officially witness and register the adoption. Harry, my boy, Dumbledore greeted him warmly. A momentous day. Are you prepared? I think so, sir, Harry replied, studying his headmaster carefully. Their relationship had been strained since the revelation of Harry's treatment at the Dursleys and Dumbledore's role in placing him there. While Harry hadn't quite forgiven the elderly wizard, he had come to understand that Dumbledore's mistake had stemmed from prioritizing his physical safety over his emotional well-being, a misguided calculation rather than deliberate neglect. I owe you an apology, Harry, Dumbledore said quietly, seeming to read Harry's thoughts. Another one, in fact. I've had much time to reflect on my decisions regarding your placement, and I find myself humbled by my own fallibility. It's okay, sir, Harry said, not entirely sure if he meant it but wanting to move forward. You were trying to keep me safe. Safety takes many forms, Dumbledore replied sadly. I focused too narrowly on one kind while neglecting others equally vital. Today represents a better path forward, one that honors your mother's sacrifice while ensuring you have the family you deserve. Harry nodded, appreciating the acknowledgement. Will the ritual affect the protection my mother left me? Not negatively, Dumbledore assured him. Based on Bill's excellent preliminary work, we believe your mother's protection will actually intertwine with the Weasley family magic in potentially beneficial ways. The blood wards at Privet Drive were my creation, utilizing your mother's sacrifice. This ritual works with the protection directly, without my intermediary spell work. So I'll still be protected from Voldemort? Yes, though differently, Dumbledore confirmed. The specific shield against his touch should remain intact, while gaining additional layers of protection through the Weasley family magic. An elegant solution, I must admit, one I wish I had considered years ago. Further conversation was interrupted by Molly calling everyone to begin final preparations. Harry was guided upstairs to change into special ceremonial robes that Bill had provided, simple white garments embroidered with subtle runic patterns in golden thread. Traditional adoption attire, Bill explained as he helped Harry adjust the unfamiliar clothing. The white represents the blank slate onto which the new family magic will write itself, while the gold runes guide the magic into proper channels. When Harry returned downstairs, he found the Weasleys similarly attired in white robes, though theirs featured red runic embroidery rather than gold. Only Dumbledore maintained his purple officiating robes, while Amelia Bones wore the formal black and silver of a ministry witness. "It's time," Arthur announced, consulting a pocket watch that seemed to have more hands and symbols than numbers. "The sun approaches its zenith." They processed solemnly into the garden, where the ritual circle now gleamed with magical energy, the runes carved into the earth pulsing gently with golden light. At the center stood a stone altar bearing a silver bowl, an ornate ritual knife, and 7 candles, one for each existing Weasley family member, Harry noted, counting automatically. "The 8th will be lit for you during the ceremony," Dumbledore explained, noticing Harry's observation. "Symbolizing your addition to the family." The Weasleys positioned themselves around the circle according to Bill's quiet instructions, Arthur at the northernmost point, Molly at the south, with their children arranged between them according to age. A space was left for Charlie, though Bill explained his magical consent had been incorporated into a special token that would stand in his physical place. Harry was guided to the center, beside the altar, where he stood feeling oddly exposed as the family formed a perfect circle around him. Dumbledore took position at the altar itself, opening the wooden box he had brought to reveal various magical implements and potion vials. "We gather today under the witness of magic itself," Dumbledore began, his voice carrying a formal power Harry had never heard before, "to unite Harry James Potter with the ancient and noble house of Weasley through the ritual of blood adoption. This magic, old as family itself, recognizes that true kinship transcends mere circumstance of birth, embracing instead the deliberate choice to bind lives, magic, and futures together as one." He turned to Arthur, who stepped forward into the circle. "Arthur Septimus Weasley, head of the Weasley family, do you willingly offer your blood, your magic, and your name to Harry James Potter, to make him your son in all ways recognized by magic?" "I do so offer," Arthur replied solemnly. "Freely and with full heart." "Molly Pruitt Weasley, matriarch of the Weasley family, do you willingly offer your blood, your magic, and your care to Harry James Potter, to make him your son in all ways recognized by magic?" Molly stepped forward, tears already shimmering in her eyes. "I do so offer. Freely and with full heart." Dumbledore proceeded around the circle, asking each Weasley child the same question adjusted for their relationship to Harry, Bill and Charlie, via proxy, as elder brothers, Percy as brother, Fred and George as twin brothers, a special magical distinction, Harry learned, Ron as brother, and Ginny as sister. Each responded with the formal, "I do so offer," freely and with full heart, though their individual personalities shone through even in this ritual context, Percy's precise diction, the twins' synchronized delivery, Ron's slightly nervous but determined voice, Ginny's shy but clear affirmation. Finally, Dumbledore turned to Harry. "Harry James Potter, do you willingly accept the blood, magic, and name of the Weasley family, binding yourself to them as son and brother while honoring the legacy of those who came before?" Harry's throat tightened with emotion, but he managed to speak the words he had practiced, "I do so accept. Freely and with full heart." Dumbledore nodded, satisfied, and gestured for Arthur to approach the altar first. With ritual precision, Arthur extended his palm over the silver bowl. Dumbledore touched the ceremonial knife to Arthur's skin, drawing 3 drops of blood that fell into the bowl with tiny musical sounds, like water droplets striking crystal. "Blood of the Father, freely given," Dumbledore intoned. Molly followed, then each Weasley child in turn, each contributing 3 drops of blood while Dumbledore acknowledged their specific relationship. For Charlie, Bill activated the proxy token, which released 3 preserved drops into the mixture. Finally, Harry stepped to the altar. The knife in Dumbledore's hand gleamed silver in the midday sun as it approached Harry's palm. A quick, nearly painless prick, and Harry watched as his blood, Potter blood, with its ancient magic and his mother's sacrifice, dropped into the bowl to mingle with that of the Weasleys. "Blood of the son and brother, freely given," Dumbledore proclaimed. "With this mingling, the separation ends and the union begins." He raised his wand over the bowl, moving it in complex patterns while murmuring incantations in what Harry recognized as Latin, though too archaic for him to understand. The combined blood began to glow, first red, then gold, then with a peculiar luminescence that seemed to shift between colors in a way Harry's eyes couldn't quite track. Dumbledore added several potions from his collection, each causing the mixture to change consistency and luminosity. The final addition, a clear liquid that seemed to sparkle even in the bright sunlight, caused the entire concoction to rise from the bowl in a spiraling column that hovered in the air between them. "The blood accepts the bond," Dumbledore announced. "Now let magic confirm what hearts have chosen." With a final intricate wand movement, he sent the glowing spiral outward. It separated into 8 distinct streams, each flowing toward a member of the ritual circle. Harry watched in fascination as one stream approached him, hesitating momentarily before his chest as though seeking permission. "Accept it willingly," Bill called softly from his position. "Open yourself to the magic." Harry closed his eyes, focusing on his desire to belong, to be part of this family that had shown him such unconditional love. He felt the magic touch him, a warm, tingling sensation that quickly transformed into something more profound. It was as though invisible threads were extending from his core, reaching out to connect with each Weasley, creating a web of magical affinity he could sense but not see. A sudden rush of warmth flooded through him, not painful as he had half feared, but intense and all-encompassing. He gasped as unfamiliar magic settled into his body, intertwining with his own in a dance of recognition and acceptance. He could feel the distinctive magical signatures of each Weasley, Arthur's steady reliability, Molly's fierce protection, Bill's scholarly precision, Charlie's wild affinity for magical creatures, Percy's methodical order, the twins' creative chaos, Ron's steadfast loyalty, and Ginny's bright determination. These new threads of magic didn't override his existing core, rather, they wove themselves into the fabric of his being, enriching and expanding what was already there. Most surprising was how his mother's protection responded. Instead of resisting the intrusion, it seemed to welcome the Weasley magic, especially its protective aspects, forming new patterns of defense that Harry could sense strengthening around him. As the initial rush subsided, Harry opened his eyes to find the Weasleys staring at him with expressions of wonder. It took a moment to realize why. His appearance had changed. Nothing dramatic, but noticeable nonetheless. When he lifted a hand to push his glasses up, he caught sight of subtle differences, a faint scattering of freckles across his knuckles that hadn't been there before, and a reddish tint to the black hair falling across his forehead. "It worked," Bill said, a note of professional satisfaction in his voice. "The physical manifestation confirms the magical bond took properly." Dumbledore was beaming, his blue eyes twinkling more brightly than usual. "Indeed it did. And quite powerfully, I must say. The magical resonance is extraordinary, one of the strongest adoptions I've witnessed." "Does that mean?" Molly began, unable to complete the question. "It means," Dumbledore confirmed gently, "that Harry is now your son in every magical and legal sense. The adoption is complete and irrevocable." The ritual formality broke as Molly rushed forward to envelop Harry in a tearful embrace. Arthur followed, then Bill, and soon Harry found himself in the center of a Weasley group hug, his family, now by blood as well as choice. When they finally separated, Amelia Bones approached with an official document. As ministry witness, I confirm the blood adoption of Harry James Potter into the Weasley family has been successfully completed according to all magical laws and traditions. She tapped the parchment with her wand, causing an official seal to appear. Henceforth, he shall be legally and magically recognized as Harry James Potter Weasley, with all rights, privileges, and protections thereof. She handed the document to Harry with a rare smile. Congratulations, Mr. Potter Weasley. May your new family bring you the happiness you deserve. Harry accepted the parchment, tracing the hyphenated surname with wonder. Potter Weasley. A bridge between his past and his future, honoring both the parents who had died for him and the family who had chosen him. How do you feel, Harry? Arthur asked, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. Different, Harry admitted. But in a good way. I can feel, all of you, somehow. Like new rooms in a house I've lived in all my life. The familial magic, Bill explained. It creates a subtle awareness, especially in the first days after the adoption. It will settle into the background eventually, but the connection remains. Harry nodded, still trying to process the magical changes he could feel within himself. Beyond the physical alterations, which, upon catching his reflection in a nearby window, he could see included a subtle reshaping of his face toward Weasley features while maintaining his distinctive Potter appearance, there were magical shifts he was only beginning to understand. The protection your mother left you has integrated beautifully with the Weasley family magic, Dumbledore observed, having performed several diagnostic spells while the family celebrated. It appears to have recognized the protective nature of the Weasley magical affinity and embraced it as complementary. Quite remarkable. So I'm still protected? Harry confirmed. More comprehensively than before, Dumbledore affirmed. Your mother's specific protection against Voldemort remains intact, now reinforced by the Weasley protective magic. Additionally, you now carry the broader Weasley family protections against general magical harm. An elegant solution, far superior to my blood ward compromises. The afternoon that followed passed in a blur of celebration. Molly had prepared a feast to rival any Hogwarts banquet, and the extended Weasley family, now officially including Harry, gathered around the magically expanded kitchen table to mark the occasion. As evening approached, Harry found himself sitting on the garden bench beside Arthur, watching Fred and George demonstrate their latest invention to an appreciative audience of Ron, Ginny, and Bill. Happy, son? Arthur asked quietly. The term son, now magically and legally accurate, sent a warm pulse through the newly established bond between them. Harry could feel Arthur's genuine affection flowing through that connection, steady, reliable, unconditional. Very, Harry replied simply. I never thought I could have this. Family is the greatest magic there is, Arthur said, gazing at his expanded brood with evident pride. More powerful than any spell Dumbledore could devise, more enduring than any dark curse. It's what your parents gave you with their sacrifice, and what we hope to honor by continuing their legacy of love. I think they would have liked this, Harry said softly. Being here, seeing me with all of you. I think they would have approved. I know they would have, Arthur assured him. James and Lily Potter loved you enough to die for you. They would want you surrounded by people who love you enough to live for you, to fight for you, to stand beside you through whatever comes. Whatever comes. The phrase held more meaning than its simple words suggested. Both knew that Harry's life would never be entirely peaceful, not with Voldemort's shadow still lingering, not with the fame and scrutiny that followed the boy who lived. But as Harry looked around at his new family, Molly fussing over the remains of the feast, Bill discussing curse-breaking with an unusually attentive Percy, the twins demonstrating increasingly ridiculous magical pranks while Ron laughed and Ginny offered surprisingly insightful improvements, he knew he would no longer face those challenges alone. He was Harry James Potter Weasley now. Son of James and Lily Potter, who had given him life and the protection of their sacrifice. Son of Arthur and Molly Weasley, who had given him home and the strength of their family magic. Brother to 7 siblings who would stand beside him through whatever came. The path ahead might not be easy, but for the first time in his life, Harry was truly ready to face it, not as a lonely survivor, but as a beloved son and brother with the unshakable foundation of family beneath his feet. Platform 9 3/4 bustled with the usual start-of-term chaos as the Hogwarts Express prepared for departure. Students called to friends, parents delivered last-minute advice and forgotten items, and owls hooted indignantly from their cages amid the steam and noise. The Weasley family, expanded now to include Harry, navigated through the crowd with practiced efficiency, though their progress was slowed by the frequent double-takes and curious glances directed at Harry. His altered appearance, while subtle, was noticeable enough to catch the attention of those who knew him, and rumors of his adoption had apparently spread despite the ministry's discretion. "Honestly, you'd think they'd never seen a family before," Molly muttered, ushering her children toward the train. "Harry, dear, do you have everything? Potions? New robes?" "All packed, Mum," Harry assured her, the term still new and wonderful on his tongue. In the month since the blood adoption, he had settled into his place in the Weasley family with remarkable ease, as though he had always belonged there. The physical changes from the ritual had stabilized, his perpetually unruly black hair now carried distinct auburn highlights visible in sunlight, a light dusting of Weasley freckles adorned his nose and cheeks, and his facial structure had subtly shifted toward Weasley features while maintaining his distinctive Potter appearance. To those who knew him well, he looked like a perfect blend of his original parents and his adoptive ones, exactly as the ritual intended. More significant than the physical changes were the magical ones. Healer Abernathy had declared herself delighted with his rapid improvement under the combined influence of the nutritional regimen and the family magic, which seemed to accelerate his healing. His magical abilities had developed new nuances as well, a particular affinity for protective spells that Bill had helped him begin exploring, and an increased sensitivity to magical energies that Percy theorized came from the intertwining of Potter and Weasley magical signatures. "You've got everything you need for your Hogsmeade visits?" Arthur asked, double-checking the permission form they had proudly signed as Harry's legal guardians. "Remember what we discussed about safety precautions?" "I remember, Dad," Harry nodded, touched by the concern even as he fought the typical teenage impulse to roll his eyes. The Weasleys' protective instincts had only intensified after the adoption, especially with the recent news of Sirius Black's escape from Azkaban and the disturbing theory that he might be targeting Harry. "And you'll write regularly?" Molly pressed. "Not just to tell us you're alive, but proper letters with actual information." "Yes, Mum," Harry promised with a smile. "At least once a week, and immediately if anything unusual happens." "Which, knowing Harry, will be approximately 3 days into term," Fred quipped as he loaded his trunk onto the train. "I've started a betting pool on when the first adventure occurs," George added cheerfully. "My money's on the first Hogsmeade weekend." "Boys," Molly scolded, though without much heat. The twins' teasing was part of Harry's integration into the family, being treated exactly like any other Weasley sibling, a normalcy he treasured. As the warning whistle sounded, the goodbyes became more hurried. Molly hugged each child fiercely, with an especially long embrace for Harry. "Remember, you can come home anytime," she whispered. "Not just for holidays. If you need us, for any reason, we're just a fluke call away." "I know," Harry assured her, returning the hug tightly. "Thank you, for everything." Arthur's goodbye was briefer but no less heartfelt. "We're proud of you, son," he said simply, the words carrying all the weight of their new relationship. As Harry, Ron, and Ginny boarded the train, Percy having already departed for the prefect carriage, and the twins having vanished to find Lee Jordan, Harry paused in the doorway for one last look at his parents, both sets present in his heart, if only one visible on the platform. Molly wiped tears from her eyes while Arthur wrapped a supportive arm around her shoulders, both watching with unmistakable love as the train prepared to depart. "Ready for a new year?" Ron asked as they found an empty compartment and settled in. Harry glanced out the window as the train began to move, watching Arthur and Molly until they disappeared from view. He touched the watch they had given him for his birthday, now showing all the Weasley hands, including his own, in various positions, Molly and Arthur at traveling, Percy at work, taking his prefect duties very seriously, the twins at mischief, a special addition to Harry's watch that made him smile, Ron and Ginny with him at school, and Bill and Charlie at their respective distant workplaces. Never alone again. Always connected. Always part of something larger than himself. Yeah, Harry replied, turning back to Ron with a genuine smile as the familiar excitement of returning to Hogwarts mixed with the newer, deeper contentment of knowing he had a true home to return to. I'm ready for anything. As the Hogwarts Express carried them north toward whatever adventures the new term would bring, Harry James Potter Weasley sat surrounded by family, by blood, by magic, and by choice. The road ahead might hold challenges, but for the first time in his life, Harry faced the future not merely with courage, but with hope. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.